I come home to find my husband Tim standing with his arms crossed, just like before. "I told you not to leave the house without telling me first," he says. "I'm sorry, but it was an emergency. Jordan had an accident and was taken to the hospital." "I don't care. You promised not to leave without telling me," he snaps. That's when something inside me breaks. My name is Andrea. I'm 27, a housewife, and I've been married to Tim for a year. We still feel like newlyweds, but lately there have been things bothering me. Tim is very jealous. Even when we were dating, whenever I said I was going out with friends, he would ask, "Who's going? Are there any guys?" I used to think it was cute. Once we married, Tim wanted me to stay home and be a housewife, so I quit my job. Now, I hardly talk to any men. Tim seemed happy about that. But whenever the FedEx or UPS guy comes, I try to get the door. And Tim says, "I'll get it," and doesn't let me answer the door. He's done this ever since we got married, and I'm used to it now. Honestly, I'm okay with it since he does everything for me. Tim and I met at work. I was briefly a model and attended an event for a company Tim worked for. He said it was love at first sight. After we finished, he asked me to dinner. He was kind, and I thought he seemed reliable. His company paid well, so I thought, why not? And agreed to go out. We exchanged numbers and went out a few more times. He worked hard to make me happy, which I thought was sweet. Soon, we were officially a couple. A year later, he proposed and we got married. Tim is crazy about me, but his feelings have led to some problems. I want to show you what happened. One day, I get an invitation to a high school reunion. I moved to New York for university and haven't been home in a while, so it would be nice to see my friends. But I know there's a big problem. Tim won't let me go. I need to figure out a way to make it happen. Luckily, I got the invitation while Tim was still at work. He hasn't seen it yet. After some thinking, I come up with a plan. I'll tell my parents and secretly go to the reunion. I call my mom for help before talking to Tim. I've decided to go to my parents' house this weekend. Why? Mom wants to talk to me about something. Does she want me to drag you? No, don't worry about it. It's your day off. You relax. I'll be fine. If I go, I'd stay at your parents' place too, but I won't do that. No, it's fine. She wants to talk to just me. Really? What's so important? Should I come if it's serious? No, I think it's something private. She hasn't even told my brother Jordan yet. Not even Jordan. If she hasn't told him, it must be something personal. All right. I'll miss you. Make sure to call me when you're there. Got it. Perfect. I'll be able to go to the reunion without Tim knowing. That day, I head back to my hometown and go straight to my parents' house. Just as I expected, Tim must have called Mom, and she told him, "Sorry for calling Andrea over so suddenly." Tim's relieved, and when I call him after arriving, he says, "Enjoy your time with your parents." I thank my mom and head to the reunion in the clothes I sent over. The reunion is a blast. Some people have changed a lot since high school, while others look the same. Of course, life around them has changed. Some have kids, others have gotten divorced. Since I've been with Tim, I haven't seen my old friends, so they all surround me, asking questions. They're surprised to hear how Tim and I met, but the biggest shock is that I used to be a model. I laugh and say, "Yeah, I never told you, did I?" Some of the guys compliment me saying, "You look so beautiful." I can't believe it. We all have a great time. I wanted to go to the after party, but I don't want to be too late calling Tim, so I decide to head home. Once I'm back at my parents' house, I call Tim and say, "I'm staying here tonight and will drive back in the morning." "Okay, take care on the way back. Miss you," he says. I think I'll make it home without him finding out about the reunion. The next day, I drive for 3 hours and return home. I open the door and find Tim standing there, arms crossed and looking furious. "Hi, I'm back. What's wrong?" "You're cheating on me, aren't you?" "What? No, I'm not." "Don't lie. You said your mom needed you, but you went to a class reunion instead." How does he know? I have no idea, but it's clear there's no way out. I finally tell the truth. I went to the reunion. Just as I thought. You met guys behind my back. That's cheating. No, it's not. I just went to the reunion to see my friends. I haven't seen them in a long time. But I thought you wouldn't let me. I didn't want to go somewhere with drinks and guys. I'm glad I didn't tell him earlier. If I had, I might never have seen my friends again. Apologize properly. Sorry, what? You betrayed me. You need to apologize and explain what you did wrong. Wait, you want me to do that? I didn't expect him to go this far, but I did lie to him. I agreed to apologize to Tim, going over everything I know he wants to hear. I forgive you, but there's no next time, okay? Tim's still upset, but I can't help myself. I ask him, how did you find out I went to the reunion? He looks at me, then answers, I did some research with ghosts. Ghosts? I ask, confused. He explains in a way that leaves me shocked. First, he checked my Facebook and found people who seemed to be my schoolmates. Then he searched their names on Instagram and Twitter, looking through all their posts. After a few hours, he found a post on Instagram, a disappearing story, with school reunion written on it. He took a screenshot and examined the people in the photo until he saw me. Honestly, I felt disgusted. Even if he's that jealous, to go to those lengths, it's just too much. Since then, Tim's behavior has become even more controlling. He calls me every day on his lunch break, and if I don't answer, he floods my phone with messages and scolds me. I have to let him know exactly when I leave the house. If I leave without telling him, even if it's just to go to the store, he gets angry. This is too much to handle, and I start thinking about divorce. But being a housewife makes it difficult. If I get divorced, I'm not sure how I would support myself, especially since Tim won't let me go out to look for a job. Plus, he makes a good living, and I enjoy a comfortable life because of him. That's another reason I'm hesitant to divorce him. Then, one day, I get a call from my mom. My brother Jordan has been in a car accident. Panicked, I rush to the hospital. Is he okay? Is he awake? I rush to his room and see him sitting up in bed. Hey, Andrea, you're here, Jordan says, looking surprisingly fine. What happened? I heard you were in an accident. Yeah, I was, but I'm okay, he laughs. Are you sure? You scared me half to death, I say, relieved. Jordan explains that another car had swerved into his lane, forcing him to slam into a guardrail. He hurt his hip but luckily had insurance for the car damage. Was it really that bad? I ask. Yeah, but I'll be fine. I'm stuck here for a month though, Jordan says cheerfully, trying to make light of it, even though he's lucky to be alive. I'm just so happy you're okay. I tell him, feeling a huge weight lift off my shoulders. I head back home later, still thinking about what happened. But I don't realize yet that I've made a huge mistake. When I get home, Tim's standing there with his arms crossed, just like before. I told you not to leave the house without telling me first, he says, glaring at me. I'm sorry, but it was an emergency. Jordan had an accident and was taken to the hospital. I don't care. You broke your promise and left without telling me, he says, his voice cold. That's when something inside me breaks. What do you mean you don't care? I can't take this anymore. Your brother almost died today. What are you talking about? Stop being so possessive. You're being selfish. I can't stand this anymore. I want a divorce. I snap and demand a divorce, and suddenly Tim panics. Divorce? Why now? This isn't sudden. I can't live like this anymore. I can't be with you, I say, my voice shaking. Tim starts crying, his tears flowing as he pleads with me. I'm sorry. I won't be so possessive anymore. Please forgive me. Don't divorce me. But I know you won't change. Not like this. I ignore him, pack my things, and head to my parents' house, ready to leave it all behind. Later, I send Tim the divorce papers, but he refuses to sign them. Well, I didn't expect him to, but I have a plan. I decide to go to Tim's office and ask for a divorce there. It seems he's known as a strict boss, respected by his colleagues, even the women. I'm about to show them who he really is. When I arrive, Tim quickly approaches me. Thanks for coming, but maybe we should talk somewhere else, he says, trying to pull me aside. I ignore him and walk straight into his office. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry to interrupt, but could I have a moment of your time? I've asked him for a divorce, but he refuses to accept it. Everyone is staring at me now. Tim hurries in, trying to stop me, but I press play on a recording of him crying and begging me not to leave. His colleagues start to gather around, intrigued. I go on to explain how Tim found out about me attending the class reunion, showing them the lengths he went to track me down. Everyone's reaction is a mix of shock and disgust. The female workers look at him like he's garbage. They all turn coldly toward Tim. Stop it. Why are you doing this? He pleads. It's because you won't accept the divorce. I shout. I'm not going to keep reporting to you about when I leave or come home, even if it's just to the supermarket. Please don't tell them that, Tim begs. I can see it now. Tim's reputation is completely ruined. His colleagues look at him in disbelief. Finally, in a last-ditch effort to avoid further humiliation, Tim sighs, defeated, and signs the divorce papers. I'm free from him at last. I leave the office, feeling lighter than I have in years. Afterward, no one takes Tim seriously anymore. They laugh at him behind his back. It turns out he had been bragging about how head over heels I was for him. But now everyone knows he was lying. He's completely ignored, and his position at work becomes very difficult. Well, he brought it on himself. As for me, I moved back to my hometown and start a new life. A high school classmate introduced me to a great job, and later I met an amazing man at the office. We got married and had children, building a happy family together. My new husband is kind and not possessive like Tim, and I feel so much freedom in my life. I'm truly happy now. I look forward to continuing this wonderful life with my family, watching my kids grow up. Thanks for sticking with me until the end. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you in the next one.
I smoothed down my silk dress for the 100th time, watching the anniversary banner flutter in the evening breeze. Celebrating 10 years of love, Sydney and Lyle sparkled in gold letters, mocking me with every gentle sway. My name is Sydney, and this was supposed to be the happiest night of my marriage. Instead, it became the night everything fell apart. You look stunning, sis. Sadie appeared beside me, champagne flute in hand. Though I still think you should have gone with the red dress. Lyle likes blue, I replied automatically, then caught myself. Why did I still care what he liked? The garden party was in full swing, fairy lights twinkling in the trees of our backyard. 50 of our closest friends and family members mingled around elegant cocktail tables, their laughter carrying across the manicured lawn. My best friend Elise had helped plan every detail, right down to the hand-calligraphed place cards. Elise, who hadn't arrived yet. Elise, who'd been mysteriously busy lately. "Where's Lyle?" Sadie asked, scanning the crowd. "Isn't it time for his speech?" "Probably inside preparing. You know how he likes to make an entrance." Right on cue, my husband emerged from the house, looking devastatingly handsome in his tailored suit. But something was off in his expression, a glint in his eye I'd never seen before. "Everyone, if I could have your attention, please." Lyle's voice carried across the garden. The chatter died down as guests turned toward him. "First, I want to thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate 10 wonderful years with my beautiful wife, Sydney." Polite applause. I forced a smile, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. "However," he continued, "tonight isn't just about celebrating the past. It's about embracing the future." He extended his hand toward the house. "Elise, darling." The world tilted sideways as Elise stepped out, wearing a red dress that hugged every curve. She took Lyle's hand, and they shared a look that told me everything I needed to know. "Many of you know Elise as Sydney's best friend," Lyle announced. "But for the past year, she's been much more than that to me. She's shown me what real love feels like." The garden erupted in gasps and murmurs. Sadie's hand found mine, squeezing tight. "Sydney!" Lyle turned to me, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "I'm sorry it had to happen this way, but Elise and I are in love. We're moving to the coast house, and my lawyer will be in touch about the divorce." I stood frozen, champagne flute trembling in my hand, as my husband and best friend smiled at our guests like they were announcing an engagement rather than destroying my life. "You bastard!" Sadie hissed, starting forward. But I held her back. "Not here," I whispered. "Not now." Elise caught my eye across the garden. She had the audacity to mouth, "I'm sorry," before turning back to Lyle, who was now proposing a toast to new beginnings. The party dissolved into chaos. Some guests hurried to leave. Others clustered in shocked groups, whispering behind their hands. My mother, Vada, appeared at my side, her face tight with fury. "Sydney, honey, let's get you inside." "No." My voice came out stronger than I expected. "This is my house, my party. I'm not going anywhere." I walked straight to the bar, set down my champagne, and picked up a bottle of Lyle's favorite scotch, the $300 bottle he'd been saving for a special occasion. Without breaking eye contact with him, I poured the entire thing onto his precious imported roses. "Sydney!" he barked, finally losing his composure. "Those roses are mine now," I finished coldly. "Along with everything else you thought you could take from me." I turned to the remaining guests, my voice clear and steady. "Thank you all for coming. Unfortunately, the party's over. Please drive safely." As people filed out, I caught snippets of conversation. "Can you believe the nerve? Poor Sydney. Always knew there was something off about him." Sadie stayed by my side until the last guest left, then pulled me into a fierce hug. "What do you need?" I pulled back, my mind already racing with possibilities. "I need Noah's number, the lawyer who handled Carmen's divorce last year." "The shark?" Sadie raised an eyebrow. "I thought you said he was too aggressive." I watched Lyle and Elise climb into his Mercedes, probably heading to the coast house he'd mentioned, the house I'd helped him buy. Aggressive is exactly what I need right now. As their taillights disappeared down the driveway, I felt something shift inside me. The shock and hurt were still there, but underneath was something stronger. Determination. "They think they've won," I said quietly. "They have no idea what's coming." Noah's office smelled like leather and success. He studied the stack of photos I'd placed on his mahogany desk, his expression unreadable behind wire-rimmed glasses. "How long have you been collecting evidence?" he asked, spreading out the surveillance photos. Each one showed Lyle and Elise at various locations over the past month. Restaurants, hotels, the coast house. 6 weeks, I replied. Ever since I found receipts for jewelry I never received. Smart. He nodded approvingly. Most clients come to me after the fact, running on emotion. You came prepared. I pulled out my phone, opening a spreadsheet. I've documented everything. Missing money from our joint accounts, suspicious transfers, business trips that never happened. The private investigator's reports are thorough, Noah said, flipping through the file. Hotel receipts, credit card statements. You've done half my job for me. I learned from Lyle's mistakes. I leaned forward. He always underestimated me because I let him handle the finances. But I've been watching, learning, documenting. A knock interrupted us. Noah's assistant poked her head in. Mr. Gibson is here to see you. I straightened in my chair as Cade walked in, looking uncomfortable in his business suit. As Lyle's partner, I hadn't expected him to agree to meet. Sydney, he nodded, taking the seat beside me. I came because, well, there are things you need to know. Noah pulled out a legal pad. Mr. Gibson, you understand this conversation is being recorded? Yeah. Cade ran a hand through his hair. Look, Sydney, Lyle's been moving money around. Big amounts. The coast house? He didn't just buy it for a lease. He's been funneling company funds through shell corporations. My hands clenched in my lap. How much? Millions. Cade looked sick. I confronted him last week. He said he'd make me a partner in his new venture if I kept quiet. But after what he did to you at the party, he shook his head. I can't be part of this. Noah's pen scratched across his pad. Would you be willing to testify? Yes. I've brought documentation. Cade pulled out a USB drive. Everything's here. Fake invoices, wire transfers, the works. I felt dizzy. All this time, while I was planning anniversary parties. Don't! Noah cut in sharply. Don't blame yourself. Channel that energy into taking him down. My phone buzzed. A text from Sadie. He just posted pics from the coast house on Insta. You okay? I showed Noah the message. His smile was predatory. Perfect! They're documenting their affair for us. What's our next move? I asked. First, we freeze the accounts. Noah started typing on his laptop. Then we file for divorce, citing adultery and financial fraud. The evidence is solid. We'll hit him where it hurts. His reputation, his money, everything. He'll fight back, I warned. Let him. Noah's eyes gleamed. I haven't lost a case like this in 5 years, and none of my previous clients came this prepared. Cade stood to leave. I should go before anyone sees me here. Sydney, I'm sorry. I should have said something sooner. After he left, Noah turned to me. How do you want to serve him the papers? I thought about the anniversary party, about Lyle's smug smile as he humiliated me in front of everyone. He likes audiences, right? Let's give him one. The next evening, I walked into La Maison, the upscale restaurant where Lyle always entertained clients. Sure enough, he was there with Elise and 2 potential investors. Sydney! Elise's face drained of color. What are you— Don't get up, I said sweetly, nodding to the process server who appeared beside me. This will only take a moment. Mr. Jensen, the server announced loudly, you've been served. The restaurant fell silent as Lyle opened the envelope, his face darkening as he read. When he reached the part about financial fraud, his hands started shaking. You can't prove any of this, he snarled. Actually, I smiled, I can. Cade says hi, by the way. Elise grabbed the papers, her eyes widening. Lyle, what is this about shell corporations? I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Elise, you might want to check whose name is actually on the deed to that coast house. Enjoy your dinner. Outside, Sadie was waiting in her car. How did it go? Perfectly. I buckled my seatbelt, hands trembling with adrenaline. You should have seen their faces when I mentioned Cade. Think they'll figure out how long you've been planning this? I watched the restaurant disappear in the side mirror. They're about to figure out a lot of things, and this is just the beginning. You're turning into your father. Mom's words hit me like a slap as she poured tea in her sunlit kitchen. All this plotting and scheming for revenge. This isn't revenge, Mom. It's justice. I watched steam curl from my untouched cup. And please don't compare me to Dad. He said the same thing, you know, before he took everything from me in the divorce. Sadie, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. This is different, Mom. Lyle committed actual fraud. And what about forgiveness? Mom pressed. What about taking the high road? The high road? I stood up so quickly, my chair scraped against the tile. Like you did when Dad left? When you let him walk away with everything because you were too proud to fight? Sydney. No, Mom. I watched you struggle for years because you wanted to be dignified about it. Well, I'm not doing that. I'm not letting Lyle destroy me like Dad destroyed you. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's hands trembled as she set down her teacup. I didn't fight your father because I was proud, she said quietly. I didn't fight because I was scared. Scared of becoming bitter. Scared of what that bitterness would do to you girls. And look how well that worked out. I laughed harshly. Here I am, bitter anyway. My phone buzzed. A text from Noah. Emergency meeting. Lyle's making moves. I have to go. I grabbed my purse. Sadie, you coming? Sydney, wait. Mom caught my arm. Just be careful. Revenge has a way of changing people. I'm already changed, Mom. Lyle and Elise saw to that. Outside, Sadie caught up with me. She means well, you know. I know, but she doesn't understand. This isn't just about Lyle and Elise anymore. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone, showing her an email I'd received that morning. Remember Angela from accounting? She sent me proof that Lyle's been stealing from employee pension funds. Jesus Christ! Sadie's eyes widened. Does Noah know? That's what the emergency meeting is about. This is bigger than our divorce now. At Noah's office, we found him surrounded by papers, looking grimmer than usual. Lyle's trying to liquidate assets, he said without preamble. He's also filed a countersuit, claiming you knew about the business dealings and approved them. That's ridiculous, I scoffed. I have emails proving he kept me in the dark. I know, but he's desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. Noah leaned back. There's something else. Elise came to see me this morning. My stomach dropped. What? She wants to talk. Says she has information about Lyle's offshore accounts. It's a trap, Sadie said immediately. Probably, Noah agreed. But if she's telling the truth, this could be huge. I thought about Elise, my best friend since college. The woman who'd held my hand through my father's funeral, who'd helped me plan my wedding, who'd betrayed me in the worst possible way. Set up the meeting, I decided. But on our terms. Later that night, I sat in my empty house, looking through old photos. There was one of Mom, Sadie, and me at my graduation. Mom looked so proud, so hopeful for my future. My phone rang, an unknown number. Sydney? It was Vada, Lyle's mother. Please don't hang up. What do you want? To apologize. What my son did. It's unforgivable. But there's something you should know about his father's death. I sat up straighter. Lyle's father had died in a boating accident 5 years ago, leaving Lyle the business. The insurance investigation, Vada continued, her voice shaking. There were questions, things that didn't add up. Lyle was the last person to see him alive. Are you saying... I'm saying be careful, Sydney. My son, he's not who any of us thought he was. After hanging up, I called Noah. We need to look into Lyle's father's death, I said without preamble. Already on it, he replied. The insurance investigator reached out to me yesterday. Seems he never believed it was an accident. I looked at the photo of my family again, at my mother's face, worn but dignified in her grief. Mom was wrong, I whispered. This isn't about revenge anymore. It's about stopping him before he hurts anyone else. Sydney? Noah's voice was gentle. Are you sure you want to go down this road? Once we start digging into his father's death, I'm sure. I touched my mother's face in the photo. Some things are worth fighting for, even if they change us. The insurance investigator found this in the archived files. Noah spread crime scene photos across his desk. Notice anything strange about the boat's steering mechanism? I leaned closer, studying the images of Lyle's father's yacht. It looks tampered with. Exactly. Noah pulled out another document. The investigator was building a case, but suddenly dropped it. A week later, he bought a house in Florida, cash payment. Lyle paid him off, I breathed. That's our theory. But proving it now. Noah shrugged. What matters is the pattern. Your husband has a history of making problems disappear with money. Not this time. I handed him a USB drive. Angela sent more files. Employee complaints, missing funds, everything. Noah plugged in the drive, scanning the documents. His eyebrows shot up. This is significant. With this evidence, we can... A knock interrupted us. Noah's assistant ushered in Elise, who looked smaller somehow, her designer clothes hanging loose on her frame. Sydney! She wouldn't meet my eyes. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Talk fast, I said coldly. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking. 2 days ago, I found these on Lyle's laptop. She showed us photos of documents, banking statements, offshore accounts. He doesn't know I saw them. He's been getting strange calls lately, speaking in Russian. Noah took the phone, examining the images. These are legitimate banking documents, Russian oligarch connections. This is serious money laundering. Why are you showing us this? I demanded. Elise's eyes filled with tears. Because I'm scared, Sid. The things I've heard him say on those calls. He's not who I thought he was. Last night, he was talking about taking care of loose ends. My blood ran cold, remembering Vada's warning. Did he mention specific names? Noah asked sharply. Cade. Elise wiped her eyes. He knows Cade talked to you. I grabbed my phone, dialing Cade's number. Straight to voicemail. I'll send someone to check on him, Noah said, already making calls. There's more, Elise continued. The Coast House? It's not just a love nest. There's a safe room in the basement. I saw him storing documents there, but he caught me looking. Is that why you're really here? I studied her face. Because he caught you? She nodded miserably. He changed after that, started watching me constantly. I realized I'm just another loose end. Noah's phone buzzed. His face darkened as he read the message. Cade's gone. His apartment's been ransacked. Oh, God! Elise started shaking. He's really doing it. We need to move fast, Noah said, gathering papers. I'm calling the FBI. This is beyond white-collar crime now. What about Cade? I asked. I have a contact in missing persons. We'll find him. Noah turned to Elise. We'll need your official statement. I'll tell them everything, she whispered. Just protect me, please. I looked at my former best friend, seeing not the woman who betrayed me, but someone as trapped as I once was. You can stay with Sadie, I heard myself say. She has security cameras, and Lyle doesn't know where she lives. Sydney, Elise's voice broke. I'm so sorry for everything. Save it. This isn't forgiveness. This is survival. Noah's assistant burst in. Turn on the news, now! The TV flickered to life, showing breaking news. Local businessman found injured in apparent hit and run. The bottom dropped out of my stomach as Cade's photo appeared on screen. He's alive, Noah said quickly. In critical condition, but alive. My phone rang. Sadie. Are you watching the news? Mom just called. 2 men were asking questions about you in her neighborhood. Get Mom and bring her to your place, I ordered. Now, don't stop for anything. After hanging up, I turned to Noah. How fast can we move on this? I've got FBI agents standing by. But Sydney, he hesitated. Once we pull this trigger, there's no going back. Your life will never be the same. I thought about Cade in the hospital, about Elise's haunted eyes, about the boat that killed Lyle's father. My life changed the moment I married him, I said. I just didn't know it then. Noah nodded, picking up his phone. I'll make the call. As he spoke to the FBI, I watched Elise huddled in her chair, Cade's face frozen on the TV screen, and felt a strange calm settle over me. This wasn't about my marriage anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about justice. And justice, I was learning, could be more devastating than any revenge. FBI agents swarmed Sadie's living room, setting up surveillance equipment while Mom stress-baked in the kitchen. The smell of chocolate chip cookies filled the air, a surreal contrast to the gravity of our situation. Your husband's got friends in high places, Agent Torres said, showing me surveillance photos. Russian connections, dirty politicians, judges on the payroll. This goes deeper than we thought. Tell them about the boat accident, Elise called from the kitchen, where she was helping Mom. I watched Mom's hands freeze mid-scoop. What about a boat accident? Before I could answer, my phone lit up with Lyle's number. The room fell silent. Put it on speaker, Agent Torres instructed, signaling her team to record. I answered. Hello, Lyle. Darling. His voice was silk over steel. We need to talk about Cade's unfortunate accident. Accident? I kept my voice steady. Like your father's accident? A pause. Careful, Sydney. You're playing a dangerous game. No, Lyle, you are. How many accidents are you responsible for? I'm trying to be civil, he said. Call off the FBI, drop the divorce proceedings, and this all goes away. Otherwise, he let the threat hang. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a way out. More than I offered my father when he threatened to expose my early business dealings, more than I'm offering Cade if he wakes up. The FBI agents exchanged glances, frantically taking notes. You just confessed to attempted murder, I said. Lyle laughed. On an unrecorded line? Prove it. Agent Torres held up her tablet, showing the active recording. Check your facts, darling, I replied. And check your phone. The FBI says hi. The line went dead. We got it, Agent Torres confirmed. That confession, combined with the financial evidence. We can move on him now. Sadie burst through the front door. They found Lyle's hitman. He's talking. What? Elise jumped up. How? Turns out he has a conscience. And a family. Sadie dropped her bag. He's giving up everything. The boat accident, Cade, all of it. Mom sat heavily on the couch. I can't believe this. I helped plan his father's funeral. I consoled him. He fooled everyone, I said quietly. Not everyone. Sadie pulled out her laptop. Remember that intern who quit suddenly last year? I found her. She played a video call. A young woman appeared on screen. I have recordings, the former intern said. Conversations between Lyle and Elise from before your anniversary party. They were planning everything. How to humiliate you, how to take control of the company. Elise went pale. That was different. I didn't know about the other things then. Play it, I ordered. The recording started. Lyle's voice, then Elise's laughter. Once Sydney's out of the picture, we'll have everything. What about the employees' pension fund? Already moved offshore. By the time anyone notices... I turned to Elise. You knew about the stolen pensions? She crumpled. At first, it seemed like clever business. By the time I realized... Get out! My voice shook. Sydney, please! Agent Torres, please remove her. She's just confessed to being an accessory. As agents led Elise away, Mom touched my shoulder. Are you okay? No. I watched Elise's tears, remembering years of friendship turn to ash. But I will be. My phone buzzed. A text from Noah. Hospital called. Cade's awake. I need to go, I told Agent Torres. Cade might remember something. Take a protection detail, she insisted. Lyle's desperate now. Desperate men. Do desperate things, I finished. I know. I married one. At the hospital, Cade was pale but alert. Sydney, he croaked. I remember the car, black SUV. Lyle was driving. You're sure? Positive. He didn't even try to hide his face. Just smiled and hit the gas. I squeezed his hand. We got him, Cade. It's over. Not yet. He struggled to sit up. There's a storage unit. Address is in my phone. Everything's there. Original documents, recordings, a backup drive. I was heading there when... A commotion erupted in the hallway. Agent Torres burst in. Lyle's gone, she announced. Private plane took off 20 minutes ago. Russian registration. He's running, I realized. With our money, Cade added bitterly. I thought about the evidence mounting against Lyle, about Elise's betrayal, about all the lives destroyed in his wake. Let him run, I said finally. The truth is already out. His empire is falling. Sometimes losing everything is worse than prison. Speaking from experience? Cade asked softly. I looked out the hospital window at the setting sun. No, I didn't lose everything. I just lost what I thought I had. And maybe that's not the same thing at all. The coast house stood empty, yellow crime scene tape fluttering in the ocean breeze. I stepped carefully through the front door, followed by Agent Torres and her team. The safe room's this way, I said, leading them downstairs. The basement smelled like expensive leather and fear. Behind a false wine rack, we found the hidden door Elise had mentioned. It took the FBI tech team 20 minutes to crack the electronic lock. My God, Agent Torres breathed as the door swung open. The room was a testament to Lyle's paranoia. Multiple computers, servers, file cabinets. On one wall, a corkboard displayed photos connected by red string. Me, Cade, business associates, even his own mother. He was tracking everyone, I murmured. Look at this. Torres pointed to a document on the desk. Transfer orders. He didn't just run with the money. He's been planning this escape for months. My eyes caught on a familiar box in the corner. That's our wedding album. Inside, instead of photos, I found stacks of cash and fake passports. Our entire marriage had literally been a cover story. Sydney? Mom's voice echoed from upstairs. Are you down there? Mrs. Murphy, this is an active crime scene, Torres started. Let her come, I called back. She needs to see this. Mom descended the stairs slowly, taking in the surveillance equipment, the wall of photos, the evidence of Lyle's true nature. I found this at home, she said, holding out a letter. It came this morning. The envelope bore a Russian postmark. Inside was a single page. Sydney, by now you've found everything. Congratulations on finally showing some backbone. But ask yourself, did you win? The money's gone. Your reputation's tied to mine. And sweet, naive Elise? She played you better than I ever did. Ask her about Atlantic City last year. Lyle. What happened in Atlantic City? Torres asked. My hands shook. I had a miscarriage. Elise was with me at the hospital while Lyle was supposedly at a business conference. Check the surveillance board, a junior agent called out. There's a folder marked Atlantic City. The photos inside showed Lyle and Elise at a casino, all over each other, while I was losing our baby. The timestamp matched perfectly. Sydney. Mom reached for me. Don't. I stepped back, bumping into the desk. A frame fell, glass shattering. Beneath the broken shards lay a familiar document. My father's old business card. What was Dad's card doing here? Mom went very still. There's something I never told you about your father's bankruptcy. Mom? Lyle. He orchestrated it. Before you even met him, he wanted your father's shipping contracts. When your father refused to sell, the room spun. Are you saying Lyle destroyed Dad's business just to get to me? He played a very long game, Torres said quietly. The question is, why you specifically? A memory surfaced. Dad's last good day, before the bankruptcy broke him. He'd mentioned a promising deal, something about Russian shipping routes. Oh, God. I sank into Lyle's leather chair. Dad discovered Lyle's Russian connections back then, didn't he? That's why. Mom nodded. Your father was going to expose everything. Then suddenly he was bankrupt, discredited. Nobody would believe him. And I married the man who destroyed him. Bile rose in my throat. I helped him host parties, smiled at his friends, planned our anniversary. Stop! Mom's voice cracked like a whip. You didn't know. None of us knew. Agent Torres? Another agent burst in. We found something in the server logs, video files. The screen flickered to life, showing Lyle in this very room. If you're watching this, Sydney, you've won. Sort of. His recorded self smiled. But remember, you loved me. For 10 years, you loved a lie. What does that say about you? I stood up, walked to the screen, and pulled the plug. He's wrong, Mom said firmly. Love isn't weakness. Trusting people isn't weakness. Isn't it? I gestured at the evidence of Lyle's deception surrounding us. Look what trust got me. It got you the strength to fight back. It got you people who stood by you. Sadie, Noah, even Cade. And Elise? Some betrayals cut deeper than others. Mom touched my cheek. But they don't define us. Your father taught me that. Torres cleared her throat. We've got enough to freeze any accounts we find. With the evidence here, plus Cade's testimony. It's not about the money anymore, I said. It's about making sure he can't do this to anyone else. As we left the safe room, I paused in the doorway. The setting sun cast long shadows through the windows, making the crime scene tape glow like warning signs I should have seen years ago. You okay? Mom asked. No. I took her hand. But I will be. The courthouse buzzed with tension as I took the stand. 3 months had passed since Lyle's escape to Russia. But today wasn't about him. Today was about Elise. She sat at the defendant's table, designer clothes replaced by prison orange, her lawyer whispering urgently in her ear. Please state your name for the record, the prosecutor began. Sydney Jensen. My voice carried through the packed courtroom. Mrs. Jensen, when did you first become aware of the financial fraud at your husband's company? Objection. Elise's lawyer stood. Speculation about Mr. Jensen's activities goes directly to establishing the defendant's role, the prosecutor countered. Mrs. Jensen was a witness to both the personal and professional deceptions. Overruled. Judge Martinez nodded at me. Continue. I described finding the discrepancies, hiring the investigator, discovering the scope of Lyle's crimes. Through it all, Elise stared at her hands. And the defendant's role in all this? She was more than just my husband's mistress, I said clearly. She helped him hide money, attended meetings with his Russian contacts, and knew about the pension fund theft months before it was discovered. "That's a lie!" Elise burst out. "I didn't know everything." "Ms. West, control your client," Judge Martinez warned. The prosecutor held up a document. "This is a transcript of a conversation between the defendant and Lyle Jensen, recorded in the Coast House safe room. Would you please read the highlighted portion?" I took the paper. "Once the pension fund transfer is complete," I read, "we'll have enough to disappear. Sydney won't know what hit her." Elise's face crumpled. "And what was the date of this conversation?" 3 months before my anniversary party." The prosecutor turned to the jury. While pretending to help plan her best friend's anniversary celebration, the defendant was actively participating in fraud and theft. Sadie squeezed Mom's hand in the gallery. Behind them sat several former employees of Lyle's company, their retirement savings stolen. "Mrs. Jensen," the prosecutor continued, "tell us about Atlantic City." The room went silent. I looked directly at Elise for the first time. "I was pregnant," I said, "having complications. Elise drove me to the hospital, held my hand while I lost the baby. She said Lyle was at a business conference, but—" I gestured to the photos entered into evidence. "He was with her at a casino while I was miscarrying." A juror gasped. Elise started crying. "Sydney, please," she sobbed. "I never meant—" "Save it for your testimony," her lawyer hissed. The cross-examination was brutal. Elise's lawyer tried to paint me as a vengeful wife, suggesting I'd fabricated evidence to punish my husband's mistress. "Isn't it true," he pressed, "that you hired a private investigator before finding any evidence of wrongdoing?" "No," I replied calmly. "I hired one after finding jewelry receipts for items I never received. Items that, as evidence shows, were given to your client. And these supposed Russian connections, Atin, are documented in FBI surveillance and banking records," I cut in, "along with your client's signature on multiple offshore accounts. During a recess, Noah found me in the hallway." "Interpol called," he said quietly. "They traced one of Lyle's accounts. He's running out of money faster than expected." "Good." I watched Elise being led back to her holding cell. "Any word on extradition?" "Russia's still refusing to cooperate, but—" Noah smiled. "He can't hide forever." Back in session, Cade took the stand, still walking with a limp from the hit and run. "Ms. West was present for meetings about the pension fund transfers," he testified. "She helped create fake documentation to hide the theft." "And the attempt on your life?" "Lyle was driving, but Elise was in the car. I saw her clearly. She looked away when he accelerated." The jury took only 2 hours to reach a verdict. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of accessory to attempted murder, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of theft of employee pension funds, we find the defendant guilty. Judge Martinez's sentence was severe. 20 years, no possibility of early parole. As guards led Elise away, she turned to me one last time. "I really did love you like a sister," she said. "I know." I stood to leave. That's what makes it unforgivable. Outside, reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. Mom and Sadie flanked me as Noah handled the press. "How does it feel?" a reporter shouted. "Getting justice?" I thought about Lyle, burning through his stolen money in Russia. About Elise, facing decades in prison. About my father, who died never knowing why his business really failed. "Justice isn't what I expected," I said finally. "It doesn't fix what's broken. But maybe it prevents more things from breaking." Agent Torres waited by her car. "Ready for phase 2? We've got a lead on Lyle's location." I nodded, feeling the weight of the past year, but also its purpose. "Let's finish this." The Moscow hotel room felt like a trap closing in. Through my earpiece, Agent Torres whispered, "Target approaching. Remember the plan." I adjusted my blonde wig, checking my reflection. The woman who stared back looked nothing like Sydney Jensen. Perfect. A knock at the door. Room service. I opened it to find Lyle, thinner and grayer, but still wearing that arrogant smile. He pushed the cart in, not really looking at me. "Your caviar, madam," he said in badly accented Russian. "Thank you, darling." I used my normal voice. He froze, turned slowly. "Hello, Lyle." "Sydney?" His hand moved toward his jacket. "I wouldn't," Agent Torres said, stepping out of the bathroom with her weapon drawn. "Hands where we can see them." Russian police burst through the door, followed by Interpol agents. Lyle's face contorted with rage. "How did you find me?" "You got sloppy." I pulled off the wig. "That gambling habit of yours? Casino cameras are everywhere, even in Moscow." "You can't touch me here," he snarled. "I have protection." "Had protection," Torres corrected. "Amazing what happens when Russian oligarchs discover you've been skimming from them too." Lyle's shoulders sagged as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "Was any of it real?" he asked quietly. "Us?" "I loved you," I replied. "That was real. Everything else was you." As they led him away, his last words hung in the air. "I never meant for your father to die from the stress. Just his business, remember that." Back in my real hotel room, I called Mom. "It's done," I said. "They're extraditing him tomorrow." "Are you okay?" "I don't know what I am." I watched Moscow's lights twinkle outside. "Did you know Dad suspected something before he died?" "He left a letter," Mom admitted. "I found it last week, cleaning out the attic. He wrote that something felt wrong about the bankruptcy, but he couldn't prove it. He was more worried about how it would affect you. I wish he'd told me. Would you have believed him? Love blinds us sometimes, to good things and bad." A text from Noah lit up my phone. "Pension funds recovered. Russian accounts frozen. We won." "Did we?" I asked Mom. "Everything's still broken." "No," she said firmly. "Everything's clear now. Truth hurts, but lies poison. Your father taught me that." Another call beeped in. Cade. "The company board met," he said when I switched over. "They want you to take over as CEO, help rebuild what Lyle destroyed." "Me? But I'm his wife." "Ex-wife," he corrected. "And the person who exposed the fraud, saved the pension fund, and protected the employees. They trust you." I thought about all the families affected by Lyle's schemes, about redemption, about legacy. "When's the first board meeting?" "Tomorrow at 9. Your office is already set up." My office. In the building where I'd once been just Lyle's wife. Agent Torres knocked on my door. "Car's ready. Time to go home." At the airport, she handed me a file. Lyle's confession. He admitted everything. Your father's bankruptcy, the pension theft, his father's death, even named his Russian contacts. Why confess now? Sometimes running takes more energy than facing consequences. She smiled. "You taught me that." The flight home was quiet. I read Dad's letter twice, recognizing his handwriting, feeling his love and worry across the years. Sadie met me at the airport, hugging me tight. "Ready to go home?" "Not to the old house," I said. "Too many ghosts." "No," she grinned. "Your new place. Mom and I finished moving your stuff today." The apartment was perfect. High-rise with a city view, no memories of Lyle. "One last thing," Sadie said, pulling out an envelope. "Elise wrote this from prison. Do you want it?" I took the letter, felt its weight. "Not yet. Maybe someday." "Fair enough." She squeezed my hand. "Want company tonight?" "No," I smiled. "I need to work on my speech for tomorrow. First day as CEO." After she left, I stood at the window, watching the city below. My phone buzzed with a text from Noah. "Proud of you. Dinner sometime?" I thought about trust, about fresh starts, about choosing to believe in good things despite knowing how badly they can hurt. "Yes," I texted back, "but not at La Maison." His reply came quickly. "Never there again. How about that new Italian place? Clean slate?" I looked at my reflection in the window, stronger, wiser, but still capable of hope. "Clean slate," I replied. I'd like that.
The first thing I noticed when I walked through my front door was the silence. No video game sounds from Darnell's room, no pop music from Jennifer's, just the hollow echo of my footsteps and the faint sound of giggling. I'm Hannah, and I just spent 2 weeks in the hospital recovering from major surgery. All I wanted was to hug my kids and sleep in my own bed. Instead, I found my sister-in-law Tatum perched on my living room couch like she owned the place, scrolling through her phone with a smirk on her face. "Where are the kids?" I asked, my stomach already nodding. Something felt wrong. Tatum looked up, her perfectly manicured fingers still tapping away at her screen. "Oh, Hannah, you're home earlier than expected. How are you feeling?" "Where are my children, Tatum?" She waved her hand dismissively. "They're fine, safe and sound at Wellington Academy. It's the best boarding school in the state." The room started spinning. "Boarding school? What are you talking about?" "Well, someone had to step up while you were indisposed," she said, emphasizing the last word, like my surgery had been an inconvenience to her. Clifford agreed it was for the best. "Clifford," my voice cracked. "My husband agreed to send our children away without even telling me. He knows I have their best interest at heart. Always have." She stood up, smoothing her designer dress. "The local schools here are so inadequate. Wellington will give them the advantages they deserve." I grabbed my phone, hands shaking as I dialed Clifford's number. He answered on the third ring. "Why didn't you tell me?" I demanded, before he could even say hello. "Hannah, honey, I was going to explain when you got home," he said, his voice maddeningly calm. "Tatum found this amazing opportunity." "Amazing opportunity? There are children, Clifford, not some business deal." "Keep your voice down," Tatum interrupted, placing her hand on my arm. I jerked away from her touch. "The doctors said you need to avoid stress. Don't you dare pretend to care about my health," I spat. "You waited until I was literally on an operating table to steal my children." "Steal?" Tatum laughed, that irritating giggle again. "Don't be so dramatic. I've done you a favor. Now you can focus on your recovery without worrying about the kids." Clifford's voice came through the phone. "Hannah, please. Tatum's right. You need to rest." "I need my children," I shouted, tears streaming down my face. "How far away is this school? When can I see them?" Tatum's smile turned predatory. "Wellington has a strict adjustment period. No parental contact for the first month. It helps them settle in." The room went silent, except for the sound of blood rushing in my ears. "A month? They expected me to go a month without seeing my babies." "Get out," I whispered. "Excuse me?" Tatum's eyes widened in mock offense. "Get out of my house." She gathered her designer purse, shaking her head like I was being unreasonable. "I'll give you time to process this. You'll thank me later, Hannah. You always do." As soon as she left, I collapsed onto the couch, still clutching my phone. Clifford was saying something, but I couldn't focus on his words. My eyes landed on a family photo on the wall, Jennifer's 13th birthday, just 3 months ago. Darnell was making bunny ears behind his sister's head, and we were all laughing. My phone buzzed with a text from my friend Georgia. "Heard you're home. Want me to bring dinner over?" I typed back quickly. "Come now, please. Emergency." 20 minutes later, Georgia found me still on the couch, surrounded by printouts of Wellington Academy's website that I'd managed to find and print. "They took my kids," I said, my voice hollow. "Tatum convinced Clifford to send them away while I was under anesthesia." Georgia's face darkened. "That snake, she's been trying to control your family for years. But this is a new low." I looked up at my friend, something shifting inside me. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, clear anger. "She thinks she's won, that I'm too weak right now to fight back. And are you?" I picked up the Wellington Academy brochure, noticing for the first time the list of board members and investors at the back. A familiar name caught my eye, and suddenly I remembered something important, something Tatum didn't know about. "No," I said, a plan already forming in my mind. "I'm not weak at all. And Tatum just made the biggest mistake of her life." "You own what?" Georgia nearly spilled her coffee across my kitchen table. 15% of Wellington Academy, I said, spreading out the investment documents I'd dug up from my home office, and 12% of their sister school, Thornfield Prep. It was part of my grandmother's estate. I never paid much attention because the quarterly reports always looked fine. Georgia leaned forward, her eyes scanning the papers. Does Tatum know about this? No. The investments are under my maiden name. I took a sip of my own coffee, grimacing at the cold liquid. But that's not all. Look at this. I pulled up my laptop, showing her the email I'd received from the school's financial director just minutes ago. Apparently, there's a major stakeholder meeting next week. Something about policy changes and budget approvals. Perfect timing, Georgia said, then hesitated. But Hannah, are you sure you're strong enough for this? You just had surgery. I'm stronger than Tatum thinks. I stood up, ignoring the slight pull of stitches. Besides, I've got more motivation than she could ever imagine. My phone buzzed. Clifford again. I'd been avoiding his calls since yesterday. You should talk to him, Georgia advised. He needs to understand what his sister really is. I answered the phone, putting it on speaker. Yes? Hannah, please. Clifford's voice cracked slightly. Can we talk about this? I'm coming home early. Good. There's something you need to see. 30 minutes later, Clifford walked in, looking tired and guilty. Before he could speak, I handed him a stack of papers. What's this? He asked. Bank statements, family trust documents, emails. I watched his face as he started reading. Your sister has been systematically isolating and manipulating this family for years. His brow furrowed. What are you talking about? Remember when she convinced you to miss Jennifer's piano recital for that emergency business meeting? There was no meeting. Remember when she told us Darnell's baseball coach had concerns about his behavior? I called the coach yesterday. He never said anything of the sort. Clifford sank into a chair. That doesn't mean... Keep reading, Georgia interrupted. Show him the trust fund papers, Hannah. I pulled out the relevant documents. She's been siphoning money from the children's trust funds to pay for this boarding school. Funds that, by the way, she shouldn't even have access to. That's impossible, Clifford protested, but his voice wavered. Tatum would never... The doorbell rang. Georgia peeked through the window and groaned. Speak of the devil. Tatum breezed in without waiting for an invitation, Knox trailing behind her. Family meeting. I brought lunch. Oh. She stopped short, seeing all of us gathered around the papers. What's going on? Just reviewing some interesting financial documents, I said coolly. Care to explain why your signature is on my children's trust fund withdrawals? Tatum's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. As their aunt and a financial advisor, I'm simply managing their assets responsibly. You mean stealing from them? Georgia muttered. Excuse me? Knox stepped forward. My wife doesn't steal. She's trying to help your children get the best education possible. I turned to him. Knox, when was the last time you checked your own accounts? Really checked them? A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. Tatum shot me a warning look. You're just upset because you're not in control right now, she said smoothly. The medication must be making you paranoid. Clifford, maybe we should consider... Consider what? I cut in. Having me declared incompetent? Is that your next move? The room went silent. Clifford looked between his sister and me, confusion and doubt warring on his face. I would never, Tatum gasped, but her hand tightened on her purse strap. I love this family. Everything I do is for this family. No, I said, standing up straight despite the pain in my abdomen. Everything you do is for yourself, but you made one crucial mistake, Tatum. Oh? Her lips curved in that condescending smile I'd grown to hate. And what's that? You sent my children to Wellington Academy without checking who owns it. I pulled out my investment portfolio. Would you like to know who has the power to change school policies, including their ridiculous no-contact rule? For the first time since I'd known her, Tatum's perfect mask cracked. She snatched the papers from my hands, her face paling as she read. This is, she started. Just the beginning, I finished for her. Now, would you like to tell everyone what you've really been up to, or should I? My phone lit up with an unknown number. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Mom, Jennifer's whispered voice made my heart skip. Jenny, baby, are you okay? I'm hiding in the bathroom. We're not supposed to have phones, but Sarah let me borrow hers. Her voice cracked. Mom, I hate it here. They took Darnell to a different campus. I haven't seen him in days. I gripped the phone tighter. They separated you. Tatum said it was better this way. Something about different programs, for different needs. Jennifer sniffled. Dad won't answer my emails. Are you sick? They told us you were too sick to take care of us. I'm fine, sweetheart. I'm coming to get you both, I promise. I checked my watch. I have a meeting with the school board tomorrow. Mrs. Harrison is really strict, Mom. She says we can't leave until... A sharp knock interrupted her. I have to go. The line went dead. I immediately called Georgia. They separated my children. Different campuses. That's not in any of the enrollment paperwork, she said. I've been going through everything you sent over. Meet me at the coffee shop near Wellington. I need to do some reconnaissance before tomorrow's board meeting. An hour later, Georgia and I sat at a corner table, watching the steady stream of Wellington Academy parents and staff members coming in for their morning coffee. That's Mrs. Harrison, Georgia whispered, nodding toward a stern-looking woman in a tailored suit. The headmistress Jennifer mentioned. I stood up, smoothing my blazer. Perfect timing. Mrs. Harrison. I approached her table. I'm Hannah, one of the school's investors. I was hoping we could chat. Her eyes narrowed slightly. I wasn't aware we had a meeting scheduled. We don't. But given tomorrow's board meeting, I thought it might be helpful to discuss some concerns privately first. I sat down without waiting for an invitation, particularly about the new split campus policy. Ah, yes, Mrs. Phillips assured us the board was fully informed. Mrs. Phillips? I interrupted. Tatum Phillips. In what capacity does she speak for the board? Mrs. Harrison frowned. As the liaison for family enrollment and policy implementation, she's been quite insistent about certain changes. I see. I pulled out my phone, showing her my investment documentation. As a major stakeholder, I find it concerning that these decisions were made without proper board approval. The color drained from her face. I was led to believe, that is, Mrs. Phillips said. I'm sure she did. Tell me, how many other families have been affected by this split campus policy? 3, including the Bennett children. She swallowed hard. Mrs. Phillips said it was a pilot program. And the no-contact policy. That was also her recommendation. She said it was standard practice at elite institutions. My phone buzzed with a text from Georgia. Knox just walked in. I looked up to see Tatum's husband ordering coffee, his shoulders tense. He'd been unusually quiet during yesterday's confrontation. Thank you for your time, Mrs. Harrison, I said, standing. I look forward to discussing these policies further at tomorrow's meeting. I intercepted Knox at the counter. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you, he muttered. But his hands shook as he reached for his coffee. Really, because I have plenty to say about the money Tatum's been moving through your joint accounts. He froze. What are you talking about? I led him to a quiet corner. $300,000, Knox. That's how much she's transferred from various family accounts in the past year alone. Did you really think those home renovation costs were legitimate? She said it was for the children's future. His voice was barely audible. Private tutors, educational consultants. Check your accounts, really check them. And ask yourself why she needed to separate my children and cut off all contact with their parents. Knox's face crumpled. She wouldn't. She couldn't. She did. And tomorrow, everyone's going to know exactly what she's been doing. I handed him a copy of the financial records. The question is, are you going to keep enabling her, or are you going to help me protect these children? He stared at the papers for a long moment. The board meeting. What time? 9 a.m. Don't tell Tatum you're coming. As I walked back to Georgia's table, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Mom? This time it was Darnell's voice, thick with tears. "Can you come get me, please?" "Soon, baby," I promised, my resolve strengthening. "Very soon. Just hold on one more day." I looked at Georgia, who was already gathering her things. "Time to finish this," she said. "Yes," I agreed. "Time to bring my children home." The Wellington Academy boardroom felt colder than it should have. I adjusted my blazer, trying to ignore the surgical pain, as I took my seat at the long mahogany table. Georgia squeezed my hand under the table. "You've got this," she whispered. Board members filed in one by one, their curious glances darting between me and the thick folders in front of each seat. Mrs. Harrison sat rigidly at the far end, her face pale. Knox slipped in just before 9, choosing a seat near the door. Then Tatum walked in, her usual confident smile faltering when she saw me. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, dropping her designer bag on the table. "Attending a board meeting, as is my right as a major stakeholder. You're not well enough to—" "Let's begin," announced Mr. Peterson, the board chairman. "First item, the recent policy changes regarding campus separation and parent communication restrictions." Tatum smoothly interrupted. "As I've explained in previous meetings, these changes are essential for—" "Actually," I stood up, ignoring the pull of stitches. "I'd like to address these policies first, specifically how they were implemented without proper board approval." "That's ridiculous," Tatum scoffed. "Everything was properly documented." "Was it?" I opened the folders in front of each board member, because these financial records show something very different. The room filled with the sound of rustling papers and sharp intakes of breath. Tatum's perfectly manicured nails drummed against the table. "Mrs. Harrison," I turned to the headmistress, "would you please share what you told me yesterday about Mrs. Phillips's role in these changes?" Mrs. Harrison cleared her throat. Mrs. Phillips presented herself as the board's official liaison. She insisted the policies had full approval. "Which they didn't," Mr. Peterson confirmed, frowning at the documents. "These signatures, they're not legitimate." "Of course they are." Tatum stood up, her voice rising. "Everything I've done is for the good of these children. Hannah is clearly unstable." "Is that why you forged my signature on these withdrawal forms?" Knox's quiet voice cut through her protests. He pulled out more papers from his briefcase. "I checked our accounts last night, Tatum. All of them." The color drained from Tatum's face. "Knox, darling, I can explain." "Explain what?" I pressed. "How you've been systematically isolating children from their families. How you've been embezzling from their trust funds." "That's a serious accusation," Mr. Peterson said gravely. "With serious evidence." I nodded to Georgia, who started passing out another set of documents. Bank records, forged signatures, falsified board approvals, and statements from other families who've been similarly targeted. The boardroom door opened again. Clifford walked in, followed by 2 police officers. "No," Tatum whispered, her perfect facade cracking. "Clifford, you can't." "I already did," my husband said quietly. "I filed the police report this morning." "Officers," Mr. Peterson stood. "I believe we have some matters to discuss regarding fraudulent financial activities." Tatum's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. "You don't understand. Hannah was neglecting those children. Someone had to step in. By stealing from them." Knox's voice shook. "By separating siblings and cutting them off from their parents. I was protecting them." "No," I said firmly. "You were controlling them, like you've tried to control everyone around you. But it's over now." The officers stepped forward. "Mrs. Phillips, we need you to come with us." "This isn't happening." She laughed hysterically. "You'll regret this, Hannah. All of you will regret this." As the officers let her out, her threats echoing down the hallway, Mr. Peterson cleared his throat. "I believe we need to take an emergency vote on reversing these unauthorized policies." He looked around the room. "All in favor?" Every hand went up. Motion passed. "Mrs. Harrison, please make arrangements for the Bennett children to be reunited immediately." I sagged in relief, feeling Georgia's supportive arm around my shoulders. Clifford approached slowly, his eyes red-rimmed. Hannah, I'm so sorry. I should have seen. Later, I cut him off. Right now, I need to get our children. Knox stood up, keys in hand. I'll drive you. It's the least I can do. As we left the boardroom, Mr. Peterson called out, Hannah, there's something else you should know. We found similar patterns at other schools, other families. This goes deeper than we thought. I turned back, steel in my voice. Then we'll help them too. But first, I'm bringing my babies home. Georgia squeezed my hand one last time. Go get them. I'll start making calls. Those other families deserve to know the truth too. Walking out of Wellington Academy, I felt stronger than I had in weeks. The surgery scar pulled with each step, but it didn't matter. I was finally going to see my children. And Tatum, she was about to learn that karma has perfect aim. Mom, Jennifer's voice echoed across the Wellington Academy courtyard as she ran toward me, her uniform skirt flying behind her. I caught her in my arms, ignoring the sharp pain in my abdomen. I knew you'd come, she sobbed into my shoulder. I knew you weren't too sick. Knox shifted uncomfortably beside us. I'll go get the car ready for Thornfield. That's where Darnell is. How could she do this? Jennifer pulled back, wiping her eyes. Aunt Tatum told us you were in a mental hospital, that you couldn't take care of us anymore. My blood ran cold. She what? She said we had to keep it a secret from everyone, Jennifer continued. She made us write these weird letters, saying we wanted to stay here. Said if we didn't, they'd take us away from you forever. Clifford, who had been silent until now, made a choked sound. Jenny, I'm so sorry. I should have questioned her more. Dad, Jennifer's voice was small. Why did you let her send us away? Before he could answer, Mrs. Harrison approached, with Jennifer's belongings. Everything's packed, and there's something else you should see. She handed me a file. Letters Tatum made all the separated children write. She was building a case for custodial interference. Building a case? Clifford took the file, his hands shaking. Against who? Against me, I said, scanning the documents. These letters paint me as an unfit mother. She was going to use them to take the kids permanently. Knox returned, car keys jingling nervously. We should get to Thornfield before they break for lunch. Darnell's waiting. The drive to Thornfield Prep was tense. Jennifer sat pressed against me in the back seat, as if afraid I'd disappear. Clifford kept trying to catch my eye in the rearview mirror, but I focused on the passing scenery instead. Thornfield was smaller than Wellington, but just as imposing. Darnell was already waiting at the front steps with his duffel bag, his face lighting up when he saw us. Mom, he crashed into me with the force of a small tornado. Did you get my message? I borrowed Tommy's phone and I got it, baby. I held him tight, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo. I'm here now. Mrs. Bennett, a tall man in a suit, approached. I'm Dr. Roberts, the headmaster. There are some concerning incidents we need to discuss regarding Darnell's behavior. What incidents? I asked, keeping my arm around my son. He's been resistant to our program, refusing to participate in mandatory counseling sessions about his family situation. Counseling sessions? Knox interrupted. What counseling sessions? Dr. Roberts consulted his tablet. Mrs. Phillips arranged them. She said the children needed help processing their mother's instability. The only unstable person here is Tatum, I said firmly, and she's currently in police custody for fraud and embezzlement. The headmaster's face paled. I had no idea. She seemed so concerned about the children's welfare. She was concerned about control, Knox said quietly. She's always been obsessed with controlling everyone around her. Jennifer tugged at my sleeve. Can we go home now? Please. Yes, I said, gathering both my children close. We're going home. As we walked to the car, Dr. Roberts called out, there will be an investigation into all of this. Other families will need to be notified. I know, I replied, and we'll help them. But right now, my children need to be home. The drive back was filled with Darnell and Jennifer's chatter as they caught up on their forced separation. In the front seat, Clifford gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Hannah, he started. I don't know how to make this right. Not now, I said quietly. We'll talk later. Knox cleared his throat. I should get to the police station. They'll need my statement about the financial records. Mom, Darnell asked from beside me. Is Aunt Tatum going to jail? Probably, I answered honestly. She hurt a lot of people. Good, Jennifer said fiercely. She deserves it. My phone buzzed with a text from Georgia. More families coming forward. 5 so far, all with similar stories. You started something big here. I looked at my children, safe beside me, then at Clifford's guilty profile in the driver's seat, and finally at Knox's devastated expression. Tatum's actions had rippled out, affecting so many lives, but now the truth was coming to light. When we get home, I said, we're ordering pizza and watching movies all day. No homework, no phones, no interruptions. Can we build a blanket fort? Darnell asked hopefully. The biggest one ever, I promised, holding them close. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone. Sometimes it's about rebuilding what they tried to break. 7 families, Georgia announced, spreading files across my dining room table. All with the same pattern. Tatum would target families during medical emergencies or personal crises, then swoop in as the caring relative. And the money? Knox asked from his corner of the table. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Siphoned through a network of fake educational consulting companies, Georgia replied. Your signature is on most of the paperwork, Knox. He put his head in his hands. I never read the documents she gave me. I just trusted her. The doorbell rang. Jennifer peeked out from the blanket fort in the living room, where she and Darnell were watching movies. Is that the police again? No, sweetie, it's probably the other families. I opened the door to find 3 couples standing there, looking uncertain. I'm Sarah's mom, one woman said. From Wellington, Georgia called us. Come in, I gestured them inside. We have a lot to discuss. As they settled around the table, their stories poured out. Each one was painfully familiar. Medical emergencies, family crises, Tatum, appearing with promises of help and solutions. She told us our daughter needed special counseling. Sarah's father said that the separation from her brother was therapeutic. She convinced my husband I was too depressed to make decisions about our sons. Another mother added tearfully, I only had postpartum anxiety, but she made it sound like I was dangerous. Knox stood up abruptly. I need to show you something. He pulled out his laptop, opening financial records. These are the real numbers, what she did with your money. The room fell silent as they looked at the screen. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, moved through shell companies and fake educational programs. Why? Sarah's mother whispered. Why would she do this? Power, Clifford said from the doorway. I hadn't heard him come in. My sister. She's always needed to control everything, everyone. Dad, Darnell called out. Come see our fort. Clifford hesitated, looking at me. I nodded slightly, and he disappeared into the living room. The detective called, Georgia said, checking her phone. Tatum's being charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and custodial interference. They're executing a search warrant on her home office right now. Knox's phone buzzed. His face went ash white as he read the message. They found more files, detailed plans for taking permanent custody of Jennifer and Darnell. She had fake psychological evaluations, forged court documents, everything. My stomach lurched. She was never going to let them come home. Mom, Jennifer appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket. Is Aunt Tatum going to try to take us away again? No, baby. I held out my arms, and she came to me. She can't hurt us anymore. The police want statements from all the children, Georgia said gently. But they'll do it with child psychologists present. Make it as easy as possible. Sarah's father stood up. We should form a support group. For the families and the kids, they need to know they're not alone. I can help with that, Knox offered quietly. It's the least I can do, considering you were a victim too, I reminded him. She manipulated everyone. The doorbell rang again. This time it was the detective, holding a stack of papers. "We found something else," she said, laying out documents. "Evidence of similar schemes in 3 other states. Different names, same pattern. This goes back years." The other parents gathered around, recognizing names and dates. Stories of other families, other children, separated and manipulated. "What do you need from us?" I asked. "Statements, testimony, evidence of financial fraud." The detective looked around the room. "The more families that come forward, the stronger the case." "We'll help," Sarah's mother said firmly. "All of us will." From the living room, I heard Darnell laugh at something Clifford said. The sound of my son's happiness, so recently restored, strengthened my resolve. "There's one more thing," Knox said. "The school board meeting tomorrow. They're voting on new policies to prevent this from ever happening again. We'll be there," I promised, "all of us." As the other families began sharing contact information and making plans, I watched Jennifer rejoin her brother in their blanket fort. Clifford caught my eye, his face full of remorse and hope. "Hannah," he started. "Later," I said. "Right now, our children need us both." My phone buzzed with another text from the detective. "Tatum's asking to make a deal. Says she has information about other cases." I looked at the families around my dining room table, all brought together by one woman's manipulation. Then at my children, safe in their fortress of blankets and pillows. "Tell her no deal," I texted back. "We're taking this all the way." Sometimes justice needs to be complete to truly heal the wounds left behind. The courthouse hallway buzzed with nervous energy. Families huddled together in small groups, children clutching their parents' hands. Georgia sat beside me, reviewing our testimony one last time. "Are you ready?" she asked. Before I could answer, the courtroom doors opened. Tatum walked in, escorted by officers, her designer outfit replaced by standard jail attire. Her eyes locked with mine, and for a moment, I saw something I'd never seen before: fear. "All rise," the bailiff called. The preliminary hearing began with the prosecution laying out their case. Evidence mounted as family after family testified about Tatum's manipulation and fraud. "She told me my wife was mentally unstable," one father testified, "convinced me to sign papers I never read. By the time I realized what was happening, my children were already separated and enrolled in different schools." Knox took the stand next, his voice shaking. "I trusted her completely. She handled all our finances, all our decisions. When she said these families needed help, I believed her." Tatum's lawyer tried to paint her as a concerned aunt and community member who maybe went too far trying to help. But then came the financial evidence. Bank records show systematic theft exceeding $2 million. The forensic accountant testified. Multiple shell companies, fake educational programs, and forged documents spanning 5 years and 3 states. When it was my turn to testify, I felt Tatum's eyes boring into me. "Mrs. Bennett," the prosecutor began, "please tell us about the day you returned from surgery." I described finding my children gone, the manipulation, the lies. As I spoke, Jennifer squeezed Darnell's hand in the gallery. "And what did you discover about Mrs. Phillips's long-term plans?" "She was building a case to take permanent custody of my children," I said clearly. "She had forged psychological evaluations, claiming I was an unfit mother." "Objection," Tatum's lawyer stood. "Speculation." "Overruled," the judge responded. "Continue." I held up the documents Knox had found. "These papers show she planned to file for emergency custody while I was still recovering from surgery. She forced my children to write letters, claiming they were afraid of me." "That's not true," Tatum suddenly shouted, jumping up. "I was protecting them. Hannah was weak, distracted. Those children needed structure, guidance." "Mrs. Phillips, control yourself," the judge warned. "You don't understand," Tatum continued, her perfect facade crumbling. "I did what no one else would do. Those families were falling apart. I fixed them. By stealing their money," Knox called from his seat. "By traumatizing children." "Order." The judge banged his gavel. Mrs. Phillips, one more outburst, and you'll be removed. The prosecution presented their final piece of evidence, a recording from Jennifer's phone. Tatum's voice filled the courtroom. Your mother's sick, Jenny, mentally sick. If you don't write this letter saying you're scared of her, they'll put you in foster care. Is that what you want? Jennifer's small voice replied. But I'm not scared of Mom. You're lying. Do it. Tatum's voice turned harsh, or you'll never see your brother again. The courtroom erupted in angry murmurs. Parents pulled their children closer. Tatum sat rigid in her chair, her face ashen. Your Honor, the prosecutor stood. Given the overwhelming evidence of fraud, emotional abuse, and attempted custodial interference, we ask that the defendant be held without bail pending trial. Your Honor, my client, Tatum's lawyer started, has shown a pattern of manipulation and control that makes her a threat to these families. The judge interrupted. Bail denied. This case will proceed to trial. As officers led Tatum away, she turned to me one last time. I was right about you, Hannah. You're weak. You always were. No, Tatum, I replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm strong enough to protect my children from you. We all are. Outside the courthouse, the families gathered together. Sarah's mother organized a support group meeting for the following week. Knox promised to help track down more of Tatum's victims in other states. Mom? Jennifer tugged at my sleeve. Can we go home now? Actually, Clifford stepped forward. I was thinking maybe we could get ice cream first, as a family. The kids looked at me hopefully. Despite everything, they still wanted their father in their lives. Ice cream sounds perfect, I said. As we walked to the car, Georgia caught my arm. The detective called. They found more evidence at Tatum's house. This could turn into a federal case. I watched my children climbing into the back seat, together and safe. Clifford held the door open, his eyes asking for forgiveness and a chance to rebuild. Whatever happens next, I said, we'll face it together, all of us. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in destroying your enemy, but in rebuilding what they tried to break. And sometimes, family means giving second chances to those who deserve them. Guilty on all counts. The judge's words echoed through the packed courtroom. Tatum stood motionless as the sentences were read out. 15 years for fraud, additional time for custodial interference, consecutive sentences totaling 23 years. I felt Jennifer squeeze my hand as Tatum was led away. This time, she didn't look back. Outside the courthouse, Knox approached our family group. The restitution papers are signed. Every family will get their money back, plus interest. It's not about the money, Sarah's mother said, hugging her daughter close. It's about healing. Speaking of healing, Georgia called out, waving a stack of papers. The support group numbers are growing. 3 more families came forward this morning. Darnell tugged at my sleeve. Mom, can we show them now? I nodded, and he pulled out his tablet. We made something, all us kids together. The gathered families crowded around as Darnell pressed play. On screen, children appeared one by one, all those who had been separated and manipulated by Tatum. Each spoke directly to the camera. My name is Jennifer, and I am not afraid. I'm Darnell, and I know my mom loves me. I'm Sarah, and it wasn't my fault. One by one, they reclaimed their voices, their truth. Parents wiped away tears as their children's faces appeared, strong and resilient. It was Jenny's idea, Clifford said softly beside me. She said everyone needed to hear their own voice again. The video ended with all the children together, saying in unison, "We are not victims, we are survivors." This is going viral, Knox said, checking his phone. Other families are reaching out, not just about Tatum, about other cases, other manipulators. Then we'll help them too, I said. That's why we started the foundation. Georgia grinned. Speaking of which, the first grant applications are in. 5 families seeking legal help to fight similar cases. We'll review them tomorrow, Sarah's father said, after the celebration. Celebration? Darnell perked up. Ice cream. Jennifer announced. Dad rented out the whole shop. Everyone's invited. As families began moving toward their cars, Knox held back. Hannah, there's something else you should know. The federal investigation found evidence of Tatum's schemes going back to college. She did this to me first. Isolated me from my family. Controlled everything. Knox, I touched his arm gently. You're free now. We all are. At the ice cream shop, children darted between tables, sharing stories and swapping flavors. Parents who had once been strangers now sat together, planning support meetings and foundation events. Clifford brought me a bowl of mint chocolate chip. He still remembered my favorite. The house feels whole again, he said quietly. With all of us there, I know I don't deserve. Stop, I interrupted. We're not talking about deserve anymore. We're talking about choose. Every day we choose to heal, to trust again, to be better. Mom, Darnell called out. Sarah's dad says we can use their lake house for the next kids' retreat. Perfect, I smiled. As long as there's no lake swimming until you finish your lessons. I can teach them, Clifford offered, like I taught Jennifer. Our daughter appeared beside us, ice cream cone in hand. Really, Dad, you'll come to the retreat? If you want me to, he said carefully. Jennifer considered this, then nodded. Yeah, I do. My phone buzzed. Another message from the detective. 2 more states opening investigations. You started something big here. Looking around the ice cream shop, I saw what we'd really started. Healing. Children laughing together. Parents sharing resources and support. Families rebuilding. Knox was organizing a father's support group. Georgia was helping Sarah's mother design a website for the foundation. Even Mrs. Harrison from Wellington had come, bringing news that the school's new family protection policies were being adopted across the state. Mom? Jennifer and Darnell sandwiched me in a hug. Can we get another scoop? Sure, I laughed. But remember, we're having family game night later. With Dad? Darnell asked. I met Clifford's hopeful gaze. With Dad? As my children raced back to the ice cream counter, I thought about Tatum's last words to me about being weak. She never understood that real strength isn't about control. It's about love, healing, and the courage to rebuild. Ready to head home? Clifford asked. Home. Not just a place, but a feeling. A choice we make every day. Yes, I said. Let's go home. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. And sometimes the greatest victory is simply finding your way back to love.
The text message glowed on Frances's phone like a burning ember. Can't wait until she's gone. Then we can finally be together properly. My trembling fingers almost dropped the device as the words seared themselves into my brain. I'm Sasha, and this is how I discovered my husband of 10 years was leaving me for my best friend. Who is it, honey? Frances called from the kitchen. The casual tone in his voice made me want to scream. Oh, just checking the time, I managed to reply, my voice steadier than I felt. I placed his phone back on the coffee table exactly as I'd found it, muscle memory from years of tidying up after him. The signs had been there for months. Stacy's constant presence at our house, their inside jokes, the way they'd both fall silent when I entered a room. I'd dismissed it all, told myself I was being paranoid. After all, Stacy had been my best friend since college. She'd been my maid of honor, for God's sake. Mom, can you help me with my science project? Peyton's voice drifted down from upstairs, anchoring me back to reality. Just a minute, sweetie, I called back, wiping away tears I hadn't realized were falling. Francis walked into the living room, wiping his hands on a dish towel. I need to talk to you about something, he said, his face serious. My heart stopped. This was it. I already know, I whispered. His expression shifted from confusion to recognition, then settled on something worse, relief. How? Does it matter? I stood up, my legs shaking. How long? Sasha, it's not what you think. How long? He sighed, running his hands through his hair. a gesture I used to find endearing. 6 months. I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. 6 months. While I was planning Peyton's birthday party, while we were having Sunday dinners with my parents, while Stacy was helping me pick out curtains for our bedroom. I never meant to hurt you, he said, reaching for my arm. I jerked away. Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me. Mom? Peyton appeared at the bottom of the stairs, her science project forgotten. Why are you crying? Frances moved toward our daughter. Princess, why don't you go back upstairs? No, I cut in. She deserves to know her father is leaving us for Aunt Stacy. The look of betrayal on my daughter's face would haunt me forever. The next few days passed in a blur. My parents arrived after Frances called them, but not to support me. No, they came to tell me how I should have seen this coming, how I'd been too focused on my marketing business, how I'd pushed Frances away. Honestly, Sasha, my mother said, stirring her tea in our kitchen, my kitchen, you can't expect a man to stick around when you're always working late. Mom, I worked late twice last month. Twice. I gripped the counter until my knuckles turned white. Meanwhile, your perfect son-in-law has been sleeping with my best friend since Christmas. Don't be crude, she snapped. Francis is a good man who made a mistake. And Stacy, well, these things happen. My father nodded sagely from his seat at the table. The important thing now is to handle this with dignity. Think about Peyton. I was always thinking about Peyton. She hadn't spoken to anyone since that night, just stayed in her room drawing picture after picture of our family, always tearing Stacy's face out when she appeared. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Stacy. Can we talk? I want to explain. Before I could respond, another message appeared. Francis and I are getting married. I'd really like your blessing. I stared at the phone, feeling something shift inside me. The hurt and betrayal crystallized into something harder, colder. They wanted my blessing? Fine. I'd give them a wedding they'd never forget. I opened my laptop and created a new folder titled Wedding Plans. But this wasn't for their wedding. It was for my investigation. Because that text I'd seen on Francis's phone, it wasn't just about their affair. The word choice, the timing, something bigger was going on. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Corey, my colleague from work. Hey, heard what happened? Need anything? I smiled for the first time in days. Corey had connections everywhere, and more importantly, he owed me a favor. Actually, I typed back, I could use your help with something. They wanted to destroy my life? Game on. I was about to become their worst nightmare. You're not going to believe what I found, Corey said, sliding into the booth across from me at our local coffee shop. His laptop was already open before he'd fully settled in. I leaned forward, wrapping my hands around my untouched coffee. Tell me, first, how are you holding up? His eyes were kind, reminding me why he was one of the few people I still trusted. I'm fine, I said automatically, then caught myself. Actually, I'm not fine. Peyton barely speaks to me. My parents think I'm having a breakdown. And yesterday, I had to watch Stacy try on wedding dresses through the window of Bella's bridal. Wait, what? Why were you... Focus, Corey. What did you find? He turned his laptop toward me. Look at these email exchanges between Stacy and your clients from last year. Remember how you lost the Johnson account and the Martinez campaign? I scanned the emails, my hands starting to shake. There they were, emails from Stacy to my biggest clients, subtly undermining my work, suggesting they might find better services elsewhere, always sent just before crucial meetings or contract renewals. She was sabotaging me, I whispered, while pretending to support my business. There's more. Corey pulled up a bank statement. Remember that investment opportunity Francis told you about? The one you decided not to pursue? I nodded, 6 months ago, Francis had suggested we invest in a new property development. I'd refused, saying it seemed too risky. Well, guess who did invest? Stacy, with money that mysteriously appeared in her account 2 days after being withdrawn from your joint account with Francis. The coffee cup cracked in my grip. He gave her our money? $50,000 worth. A barista approached to clean up the spilled coffee, but I barely noticed. I need copies of everything. Already done. Corey handed me a USB drive. But Sasha, what are you planning to do with this? The bell above the cafe door chimed, and I looked up to see Jacqueline, my half-sister, walking in. She spotted us and hesitated before approaching our table. "Hey," she said awkwardly. "Mom said you'd be here." "Come to tell me how I drove Francis away?" I asked bitterly. She slid into the booth next to me. "Actually, I came to apologize. I've been thinking about everything and something doesn't add up. Francis and Stacy, they're too perfect about it all. Like they've rehearsed everything." Corey raised an eyebrow at me. I nodded, and he turned the laptop toward Jacqueline. "Oh my God," she breathed, reading through the emails. "That bitch." "Language," I said automatically, then laughed at the absurdity of correcting my sister's language while plotting revenge. "What can I do to help?" Jacqueline asked. "Actually," I said, "you're still invited to their engagement party next week, right?" She nodded. "I need you to keep your eyes open. Watch how they interact with the guests, especially Francis's business partners." "Already on it," Corey interjected. "I've been doing some digging into his company. There are some interesting patterns in their recent acquisitions." My phone buzzed. A text from Francis. "Need to discuss Peyton's schedule for the wedding. Stacy thinks she should be the flower girl." "Over my dead body," I muttered. "Mom?" Speaking of Peyton, she appeared beside our table with my neighbor who'd been watching her. "Can we go home now?" I gathered my things, hugging Corey and Jacqueline goodbye. As we walked to the car, Peyton took my hand, something she hadn't done in weeks. "Mom," she said quietly, "I heard Dad talking to Aunt Stacy yesterday when he picked me up. They were fighting about money." I helped her into the car, mind racing. "Fighting how, sweetie?" "Aunt Stacy said something about promises, and Dad said he needed more time. They stopped when they saw me." That night, after putting Peyton to bed, I sat at my desk with the USB drive Corey had given me. As I dug deeper into the files, a pattern emerged. The sabotage of my business, the stolen investment money, they were just the tip of the iceberg. My phone lit up with a message from Jacqueline. "You won't believe what I just overheard. Call me ASAP." I dialed her number, heart pounding. Whatever Francis and Stacy were planning, they had no idea what was coming. Because while they were busy playing their perfect couple act, they'd forgotten one crucial detail. I had nothing left to lose. Well, almost nothing. I looked at Peyton's school picture on my desk and felt my resolve strengthen. I would protect her from their lies, even if it meant burning everything else to the ground. They did what? I gripped my phone tighter as Jacqueline's words sank in. "I'm telling you, Sasha, they've done this before. Remember Marcus from Francis's old firm? His wife didn't just leave him last year. Stacy was involved there too." I sat down heavily on my couch, memories flooding back. Marcus had been Francis's mentor until his sudden departure from the company. His wife had vanished shortly after, leaving behind a mess of fraud allegations that had destroyed his reputation. "But that's not even the worst part," Jacqueline continued. "I found documents in Dad's study. Francis has been manipulating company records, and Dad's signature is all over them." "Our father is involved in this?" "No, that's just it. Dad has no idea. I think Francis forged his signatures." A knock at my door made me jump. Through the peephole, I saw my mother standing there, perfectly coiffed as always. "I have to go," I told Jacqueline. "Mom's here. I opened the door and my mother swept in like she owned the place. Really, Sasha, the garden is a mess. What will the neighbors think? I've been a little busy dealing with my husband leaving me for my best friend, I said dryly. She waved her hand dismissively. About that, Francis called. He's worried about your behavior. Following Stacy around, making accusations. This needs to stop. I pulled out my laptop. Mom, I need to show you something. I don't want to see your so-called evidence. She perched on the edge of the couch. You need to accept that sometimes marriages end. Your father and I are being played for fools, I interrupted, turning the screen toward her. Look at these signatures. Really look at them. She glanced at the documents, then did a double take. These are your father's signatures on Francis's company papers. Except Dad never signed them, did he? For the first time, I saw uncertainty cross my mother's face. How did you get these? Does it matter? What matters is Francis has been forging Dad's signatures to authorize fraudulent transactions. And Stacy, she's helped him do this before. Mom? Peyton's voice came from the stairs. Grandma? My mother quickly composed herself. Hello, darling. Shouldn't you be in bed? I can't sleep. Peyton came down, clutching her stuffed rabbit. I keep having bad dreams about the wedding. I pulled her into my lap, shooting my mother a pointed look. Want to tell us about it? Aunt Stacy was wearing a black dress, and she was laughing while everyone was crying. Peyton buried her face in my shoulder. And Dad wasn't Dad anymore. My mother's face softened. Perhaps we should discuss this further, Sasha. Not in front of Peyton, of course. After putting Peyton back to bed, I found my mother in the kitchen, going through the files on my laptop. Her hands were shaking. There's more, I said quietly. Remember the investment property Francis was so excited about? She looked up sharply. The one at the lake? It doesn't exist. The company he claimed to be working with, it's a shell corporation. Stacy's name is all over the paperwork, along with 3 other women's names, all from different cities, all connected to Francis's previous business ventures. My mother sank into a chair. Your father needs to see this. Will he believe it? He'll have to. She straightened her spine. No one forges my husband's signature and gets away with it. My phone buzzed with a text from Corey. Found the smoking gun. Meeting tomorrow 9 a.m. Bring Jacqueline. Mom, I said carefully, I need your help with something, but you have to promise to hear me out completely. She nodded slowly, her eyes still on the documents. Francis and Stacy's wedding is in 3 weeks. They're expecting me to cause a scene, to act like the bitter ex-wife. But what they don't expect? I laid out my plan, watching my mother's expression change from shock to understanding to something that looked almost like pride. It's risky, she said finally. If it goes wrong, I know, but I'm not just doing this for me anymore. I showed her another document, one I'd been saving. Look at what they're planning to do with Peyton's college fund. My mother's face hardened. Tell me what you need me to do. As she left that night, she hugged me for the first time since the separation. I'm sorry I didn't believe you, she whispered. I watched her car disappear down the street, feeling stronger than I had in weeks. Francis and Stacy thought they had everyone fooled with their perfect love story, but their house of cards was about to come crashing down, and I would make sure everyone was watching when it did. You need to see this. Corey slid an envelope across the cafe table. Inside was a stack of photos. Francis and a woman I didn't recognize, looking very intimate at what appeared to be a hotel bar. When were these taken? I asked, my coffee forgotten. Last week. Corey leaned forward. Her name is Rachel. She works for the same company Francis used to scam Marcus. Jacqueline, sitting beside me, grabbed the photos. But he's supposed to be marrying Stacy in 2 weeks. Exactly, Corey said, And here's where it gets interesting. Rachel, she's been transferring large sums of money into an offshore account, an account that traces back to Stacy. My hands started shaking. They're not just scamming me, they're scamming each other. There's more, Jacqueline added. Dad confronted Francis about the forged signatures yesterday. Want to guess what happened? He denied everything. Better, he blamed you, said you must have forged them out of revenge. I laughed bitterly. Of course he did. And Dad believed him? Actually, no. Jacqueline smiled. Dad may be old school, but he knows your handwriting. He's having his lawyer look into everything. My phone buzzed. A text from Stacy. Dress fitting tomorrow. Peyton needs to be there. Don't make this difficult. She's unbelievable, I muttered. Speaking of Peyton, Corey said, where is she? With Francis. It's his weekend. The words tasted bitter. He's taking her to lunch with Stacy's family. Just then, my phone rang. Francis's number. Hello? Mom? Peyton's voice was small and upset. Can you come get me? I was already grabbing my keys. What's wrong, sweetie? Dad and Aunt Stacy are fighting really bad. She keeps saying something about Rachel, and Dad's face got all red, and I'm on my way. Where are you? The new Italian place downtown. Mom, I'm scared. I mouthed, coming? To Jacqueline and Corey. They both nodded, gathering their things. We arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes later. Through the window, I could see Francis and Stacy in what looked like an intense discussion. Peyton was huddled in her chair, trying to make herself invisible. I walked in, head high. I'm here for my daughter. Francis stood up quickly. Sasha, this isn't your concern. Really? Our crying daughter isn't my concern? I turned to Peyton. Get your things, sweetie. Stacy grabbed my arm. We need to talk. Now. I jerked away from her. Don't touch me. You don't understand, she hissed. Francis isn't who you think he is. Oh, I know exactly who he is, I said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. And I know about Rachel. The color drained from Francis's face. Stacy's eyes widened. Peyton, let's go, I said, holding out my hand. She ran to me, clutching her backpack. This isn't over, Francis called after us. No, I agreed, turning back. It's just beginning. Outside, Jacqueline wrapped Peyton in a hug while Corey kept watch through the window. They're really going at it now, he reported. Good, I said, helping Peyton into the car. Let them destroy each other. Back at home, after Peyton had calmed down and was watching TV with Jacqueline, Corey pulled me aside. There's something else you should know, he said quietly. I found evidence that Francis is planning to leave the country after the wedding. He's been looking at properties in countries without extradition treaties. And Stacy? Has no idea, but she's been moving money too, just not where Francis thinks she's moving it. My phone buzzed again, an email from my father's lawyer requesting a meeting. Then another text from Stacy. We need to talk, alone. There are things you don't know. What are you thinking? Corey asked, watching my face. I showed him the messages. I'm thinking it's time to let them implode. They're both getting sloppy, making mistakes. The wedding's in 2 weeks, he reminded me. Perfect. I smiled. Just enough time to make sure everyone sees exactly who they really are. Peyton appeared in the doorway. Mom, are you going to stop the wedding? I knelt down to her level. Honey, sometimes grown-ups do bad things, and other grown-ups have to make sure they face consequences. Do you understand? She nodded solemnly. Like when Tommy stole Sarah's lunch money and the teacher made him apologize in front of everyone? Something like that, I said, hugging her. Just bigger. Good, she said firmly, because Dad made you cry, and Aunt Stacy isn't really our friend anymore. Out of the mouths of babes, I thought. If only Francis and Stacy knew that their biggest mistake wasn't their elaborate scams or their betrayals. It was underestimating an 8-year-old's ability to see through their lies. The pre-wedding dinner was exactly as uncomfortable as I'd expected. My mother had insisted I attend for Peyton's sake, but watching Francis and Stacy play the happy couple while shooting daggers at each other was almost worth it. More wine? Francis's mother asked, her smile strained. Please, Stacy said, holding out her glass for the third time. I caught Jacqueline's eye across the table and gave a slight nod. She cleared her throat. So, Stacy, tell us about the honeymoon plans. Francis mentioned Bali. Stacy's fork clattered against her plate. Bali? No, we're going to the Maldives. That's not what Francis told his investment partners. Jacqueline continued innocently. Right, Dad? Our father looked up from his meal. He was quite specific about Bali. Something about property investments. The tension in the room thickened. Francis loosened his collar. Property investments? Stacy turned to Francis. You never mentioned any investments. It was meant to be a surprise, darling, Francis said smoothly, but I caught the warning glance he shot at my father. Speaking of surprises, my mother interjected, Stacy, dear, wasn't that Rachel at your dress fitting yesterday? Such a lovely woman. I nearly choked on my water. Corey had staged those photos perfectly. Stacy's face went pale. Who? Rachel, my mother continued, the picture of innocence. Tall, blonde, she seemed to know Francis quite well. Excuse me. Stacy pushed back from the table. I need some air. Francis stood to follow her, but Peyton grabbed his sleeve. Dad, you promised to look at my science project before dessert. Not now, Princess. But you promised. Her lower lip trembled. We'd practiced that look for hours. While Francis was distracted, I slipped out after Stacy. I found her in the garden, frantically typing on her phone. Trouble in Paradise? She spun around. What are you playing at, Sasha? Me? I'm just enjoying this lovely dinner. You're the one who seems nervous. I know what you're doing, she hissed, trying to cause problems between Francis and me. It won't work. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos of Francis and Rachel. Really? Because it seems to be working just fine. Her face crumpled for a moment before hardening. You don't understand. I had to do it. Francis, he's not who you think he is. Oh, I know exactly who he is, just like I know about the offshore accounts, Stacy. Both sets of them. She grabbed my arm. Listen to me. Francis is planning something big. After the wedding, everything okay out here? Francis appeared in the doorway, his voice tight. Fine, Stacy said quickly. Just getting some wedding advice from the expert. Back inside, Peyton was showing everyone her science project, a detailed presentation about cause and effect. And this is what happens when you mix vinegar and baking soda, she explained, pointing to a photo of an erupting volcano. Just like secrets, I added. Put enough pressure on them, and eventually... Francis's mother cleared her throat. Perhaps it's time for dessert. Actually, my father stood up. Francis, could we discuss something in my study about those signatures? I watched them leave, counting silently. 3, 2, 1. He's going to ruin everything. Stacy suddenly burst out, the wine finally loosening her tongue. All these months of planning, and he's going to take everything. The room fell silent. Take what, dear? Francis's mother asked. Stacy's eyes darted around the room, realizing her mistake. I mean... My phone buzzed, a text from Corey. Documents delivered to the SEC. Timeline moved up. Get ready. Stacy, I said calmly, would you like to tell everyone about the money, or should I? What money? Several voices asked at once. But before Stacy could respond, we heard shouting from my father's study. The door burst open and Francis stormed out, his face red. "We're leaving." He grabbed Stacy's arm. "Now." "But the dessert," his mother protested. "I said we're leaving," Francis shouted, making everyone jump. Peyton started crying and I pulled her close. "It's okay, sweetie. Remember what you learned about cause and effect?" She nodded against my shoulder as Francis and Stacy fled the house. "What just happened?" Francis's mother demanded. My father emerged from his study, holding a stack of papers. "I believe," he said gravely, "we've all been played for fools, but not for much longer." I hugged Peyton tighter, watching the chaos unfold. The wedding was in 3 days, and everything was falling apart exactly as planned. But this was just the appetizer. The main course was still to come. "The venue's been changed," Jacqueline announced, bursting into my kitchen the morning before the wedding. "They're moving it to the Grand Hotel downtown." I looked up from where I was helping Peyton with her flower girl dress alterations. "What? Why?" "Stacy claims there's a plumbing issue at the church, but I overheard her on the phone. She's terrified you'll show up at the church and make a scene." I couldn't help but laugh. If only she knew. My phone rang. "Corey, turn on the news, Channel 7, now." I grabbed the remote, and there it was. "Local business under investigation for financial fraud." Francis's company logo filled the screen. "Mom?" Peyton tugged at my sleeve. "Is Dad in trouble?" "Yes, sweetie. Remember what we talked about? About how sometimes people need to face consequences?" She nodded solemnly. "Like the volcano in my science project." The doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Stacy standing on my porch, looking frantic. I nodded to Jacqueline, who took Peyton upstairs. "You did this," Stacy accused as soon as I opened the door. "You tipped off the SEC." "Actually, I didn't." I stepped aside. "But please, come in. We should talk." She paced my living room like a caged animal. "You don't understand. The wedding has to happen tomorrow. Everything depends on it." "You mean your plan to transfer all the money to your private account before Francis can get to it?" She froze. "How did you? Or did you mean Francis's plan to flee the country with Rachel after leaving you to take the fall for his fraud?" "He wouldn't." But I saw the doubt in her eyes. "Check your phone," I said quietly. She pulled it out just as a message arrived. Photos of Francis and Rachel at the airport, time-stamped an hour ago. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no. He's running, Stacy. The SEC investigation spooked him. But here's what you don't know. Rachel, she's working with them, has been for months." Stacy sank onto my couch, her perfect makeup starting to smear. "I'll lose everything." "Not necessarily." I sat across from her. "You could tell the truth about everything, starting with Marcus." Her head snapped up. "How do you know about Marcus?" "I know a lot of things, like how you and Francis have done this before. Find a successful business owner, seduce them, destroy their marriage, take their money. But this time, you got greedy. You both wanted to scam each other." "It wasn't supposed to be you," she whispered. "You weren't the original target. But then Francis saw how successful your business was becoming." My phone buzzed again. "Corey. Francis caught at airport. Rachel wore a wire. It's all falling apart." I showed Stacy the message. "Last chance. Tell the truth at the wedding tomorrow, or go down with him." "The wedding's off," she said numbly. "No," I stood up. "The wedding needs to happen. Everyone will be there. Investors, business partners, family, all the people you've lied to. They deserve to know the truth." "Why are you doing this?" "Because you didn't just betray me, Stacy. You betrayed my daughter. You made her question everything she believed about love and trust. As if on cue, Peyton appeared at the top of the stairs in her flower girl dress. "Mom, is the wedding still happening?" Stacy looked at her, then back at me. "I'll do it. I'll tell everything." After she left, Jacqueline came downstairs. "Did she agree?" I nodded. "Call Dad. Tell him to make sure all the investors show up tomorrow. And call Corey. We need those documents ready." That night, as I laid out my outfit for the wedding, Peyton came into my room. "Mom, are you scared?" I sat on the bed, pulling her close. "A little. But sometimes being brave means doing scary things, because they're right. Like when you let me get back on my bike after I fell?" "Exactly like that." I kissed her forehead. "Now get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a big day." After she left, I checked my phone one last time. A message from my father. "Francis made bail. Wedding still on. Security arranged." Another from Corey. "Everything in place. Rachel cooperating fully with authorities." And finally, one from Stacy. "I'm sorry for everything. See you tomorrow." I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the same person who had discovered that text message on Francis's phone all those weeks ago. She was stronger now, wiser. Tomorrow, Francis and Stacy's perfect facade would crumble in front of everyone they'd ever deceived. But for me, it wouldn't be about revenge anymore. It would be about justice, about truth, about showing my daughter that sometimes the best way to heal isn't to hide from pain, but to face it head on. I turned off the light, ready for whatever the morning would bring. The Grand Hotel's ballroom buzzed with tension. I sat in the back row watching Francis fidget at the altar. He kept checking his phone, probably wondering why Rachel wasn't answering his messages. "Everything set?" Corey whispered, sliding into the seat beside me. I nodded. "SEC agents?" "In position. Exits covered." The wedding march began and Peyton started down the aisle, dropping rose petals with mechanical precision. She caught my eye and gave a tiny nod, our secret signal. Then came Stacy, floating down the aisle in white. She looked perfect, except for the slight tremor in her hands as she clutched her bouquet. "Dearly beloved," the officiant began, but before he could continue, the ballroom doors burst open. "I object." Rachel strode in, followed by two men in suits. "And so does the Securities and Exchange Commission." Francis's face went from red to white in seconds. "What is this?" "This," Rachel held up a folder, "is evidence of your fraud, Francis, dating back 3 years across 4 states. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I saw my father stand up, positioning himself near the side exit. "Stacy," Francis turned to his bride, "did you do this?" She stepped back from him. "No, Francis, but I'm done lying." She faced the crowd. "Everything you're about to hear is true. I helped him do it. All of it." "Shut up." Francis lunged for her, but my father and Corey were faster, grabbing his arms. "Let me tell them about Marcus," Stacy continued, her voice growing stronger. "About how we destroyed his life, and Sarah in Boston, and Patricia in Miami." The crowd erupted in chaos. I saw Francis's mother faint, while his father stared in horror. "You think you're so clever?" Francis snarled at Stacy. "Tell them about the money you stole, about your own offshore accounts." "Already done," Rachel said, holding up her phone. "She confessed everything yesterday, wearing a wire." I stood up. "Francis, remember when you told me I worked too much? That I was neglecting our marriage? It was all a setup, wasn't it? You needed me distracted while you and Stacy drained my accounts." "Mom?" Peyton's small voice cut through the chaos. "Is it over now?" The room fell silent. Francis looked at our daughter, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in months. "Peyton, he started. "Save it," I cut in. "She knows everything. We showed her the evidence, explained it in terms she could understand. She knows exactly what you and Stacy did. You involved our daughter in this? He spat. No, you involved our daughter when you decided to destroy our family for money. The SEC agents moved forward. Francis, you're under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You can't prove anything, he shouted, struggling against my father and Corey. Actually, Stacy stepped forward, we can prove everything. She opened her purse and pulled out a USB drive. Every transaction, every email, every conversation. I kept records of everything. Francis lunged at her, breaking free from his restraints. But before he could reach her, Peyton stepped between them, her flower basket upturned at his feet. Don't hurt anyone else, Dad, she said firmly. He froze, staring at our daughter standing there in her flower girl dress, protecting the woman who had helped destroy our family, but was now helping to serve justice. The SEC agent seized the moment, handcuffing Francis. As they led him away, he turned back one last time. Sasha, you've ruined everything. No, I said calmly, taking Peyton's hand. You did that all by yourself. Stacy approached me, tears streaming down her face. I know it means nothing now, but I am sorry, truly sorry. You're right, I replied. It means nothing. But testifying against him, that means something. The ballroom slowly emptied, shell-shocked guests filing out as reporters began arriving. My mother appeared at my side, wrapping an arm around Peyton. Let's get you out of that dress, sweetheart, she said softly. I watched them go, then turned to Corey and Jacqueline. Thank you, both of you. Are you okay? Jacqueline asked. I looked around the decorated ballroom, the flowers, the ribbons, all the trappings of what was supposed to be a perfect wedding. You know what? I actually am. Rachel approached us, holding her SEC badge. We'll need you to come in tomorrow to make a formal statement. I nodded. I'll be there. All of us will. As we left the hotel, photographers snapped pictures of Francis being led to a police car, of Stacy being escorted by federal agents, of the chaos they'd created finally catching up with them. But the only photo I cared about was the one Jacqueline took moments later. Peyton and me, walking away from the hotel, hand in hand, heading toward whatever came next. The morning sun streamed through my office windows as I reviewed the final settlement documents. My father sat across from me, pride evident in his eyes. The judge's ruling came in, he said, sliding a paper across my desk. Francis took a plea deal, 15 years. And Stacy, 5 years, reduced sentence for cooperation. She's already transferred back all the money she took from your accounts. My phone buzzed. A text from Corey. Turn on the news. I flicked on the office TV to see Rachel giving a press conference outside the courthouse. This case represents one of the largest fraud schemes we've uncovered this year, she was saying. Thanks to the courage of those who came forward. Mom! Peyton burst into the office, waving a paper. I got an A on my science project. The teacher said my presentation on cause and effect was the best in class. I hugged her tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. I'm so proud of you. Mrs. Martinez is here to see you, my assistant called from the doorway. I smiled. Mrs. Martinez had been one of my biggest clients before Stacy's sabotage. Send her in. Sasha, she greeted me warmly. I've been following the news. I had no idea. I'd like to bring my business back to you if you'll have it. I'd be honored. My father stood up. Come on, Peyton. Let's get ice cream while your mom works. After they left, I opened my laptop to find an email from Marcus's wife. Thank you, it read. Because of your evidence, they're reopening Marcus's case. His name will finally be cleared. The door opened again, and Jacqueline walked in with coffee. Guess who just called? The reality show American Justice wants to do an episode about the case. I laughed. Hard pass. That's what I told them. She sat down. How are you really doing? Watch this, I said, pulling up my business's financial reports. We've doubled our client base since the story broke. Turns out people appreciate honesty in business. And personally, I looked at the family photo on my desk, now updated to show just Peyton and me, both of us smiling genuinely. We're healing. Peyton's therapist says she's processing everything in a healthy way. She's even helping other kids at school deal with their parents' divorces. Like mother, like daughter, Jacqueline smiled. My phone rang. Corey again. The FBI wants to talk to you. They think Francis and Stacy might have had other accomplices in different states. Tell them I'll help however I can, I replied. But right now, I have a client meeting to prepare for. After hanging up, I walked to my office window, looking out at the city below. My reflection showed someone different from the broken woman who'd discovered that text message on Francis's phone. The woman staring back was stronger, wiser, and somehow more herself than she'd been in years. The door opened one more time, my mother carrying a stack of files. These just came from the prosecutor's office. They need you to verify some dates. Thanks, Mom, for everything, for believing me, eventually. She touched my cheek. I'm sorry it took me so long, but watching you handle all this, you've taught me what real strength looks like. Mom! Peyton ran back in, ice cream cone in hand. Grandpa says we can get a dog. Can we, please? I looked at my mother, who nodded encouragingly. You know what? I think that's a great idea. Really? Peyton's eyes lit up. Can we go to the shelter today? After my meeting, I promised. We'll start our new chapter together. As they left, I sat at my desk and opened Mrs. Martinez's file. The sunlight caught my wedding ring, now moved to my right hand, transformed from a symbol of betrayal into a reminder of my own resilience. My phone buzzed one last time, a message from Rachel. Just heard from the prosecutor. All of Francis's hidden assets found. Your daughter's college fund has been restored in full. I smiled, thinking of the volcano in Peyton's science project. Sometimes things have to erupt before they can settle into something better, stronger, more true. The intercom buzzed. Your next appointment is here. I straightened my papers, ready to face whatever came next. Because that's what you do when life explodes. You don't just survive the eruption. You build something better from the ashes. Send them in, I said, standing tall. The door opened to my future, and I stepped forward to meet it.
The crystal champagne flute trembled in my hand as my mother's words cut through the air like daggers. Well, at least some of my children understand the importance of family values. She raised her glass toward my brother Lionel and his wife Delaney, their matching wedding bands glinting under the chandelier. I'm Vanessa, and at 30 years old, I've become the family's cautionary tale, the unmarried daughter who dared to prioritize her dreams over society's expectations. Did you hear about Sarah's daughter? My sister-in-law Delaney's voice carried across the dining room, deliberately loud enough for me to hear. Already engaged, and she's only 25. Some women just understand their priorities better than others. I took another sip of champagne, forcing a smile as my younger sister Riley caught my eye from across the table. She gave me a subtle, sympathetic look before quickly averting her gaze. Even she, my closest ally, couldn't openly support me without risking our mother's disapproval. Vanessa, dear, my father Harold cleared his throat, have you given any more thought to joining the family business? There's always room for you in accounting. Actually, Dad, I've been working on something of my own, I said, straightening my spine. I'm launching a wellness company focused on women's empowerment. Oh, not this again, my mother Andrea interrupted, pressing her fingers to her temples. Honestly, Vanessa, when will you grow up? Look at your brother. He's running a successful investment firm, has a beautiful wife, a house in the suburbs. And I'm happy for him, I replied, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. But that's not my path. Lionel smirked from his end of the table. Come on, sis. These little passion projects of yours are cute, but it's time to face reality. You're not getting any younger. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to me, waiting for my reaction. I could feel the weight of their judgment, their disappointment, their certainty that I was making a mistake. But something inside me had finally snapped. You know what? I stood up, placing my napkin on the table. I'm done apologizing for choosing my own path. I'm done trying to fit into your narrow definition of success. Vanessa, sit down, my mother hissed. You're making a scene. No, Mother, I'm making a choice. I grabbed my purse from the back of my chair, and my choice is to leave this toxic environment and build something meaningful on my own terms. You'll fail, Delaney said, her words dripping with false concern. And when you do, don't come crying to us. I laughed, surprising even myself with how hollow it sounded. Watch me succeed, and when I do, remember this moment. As I walked toward the door, Riley jumped up. Vanessa, wait. Let her go, our mother snapped. She needs to learn the hard way. I paused at the doorway, turning back one last time. You know what's funny? You're all so focused on status and appearances that you can't see what really matters. But I promise you, one day you'll understand exactly what I mean. The door closed behind me with a satisfying click, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and opened my business plan document, the one I'd been working on in secret for months. The screen illuminated my face as I sat in my car, scrolling through pages of market research, financial projections, and marketing strategies. They thought I was just dreaming, but they had no idea how prepared I was. Every dismissive comment, every condescending smile had only fueled my determination. My phone buzzed with a text from Riley. I'm sorry about tonight. Are you okay? I typed back, I'm better than okay. I'm free. Starting the engine, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't the failure they saw. She was a fighter, an entrepreneur, a force to be reckoned with. And someday they would all see it too. As I pulled away from my parents' mansion, I made a promise to myself. I would build something so successful, so impactful, that they couldn't ignore it. And when the time came, because it would come, they would have to acknowledge that their failure of a daughter had become something they never expected. Little did I know then that karma had a way of making things interesting, and my moment would come sooner than any of us could have anticipated. 18 months after walking out of that dinner party, I stood in front of 50 women at my first wellness retreat, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. Welcome to empowered living, I said, scanning the eager faces before me. This weekend isn't just about self-care, it's about reclaiming your power. The journey here hadn't been easy. My small apartment had become command central, with my dining table doubling as both office and occasional bed when late nights bled into early mornings. But every sacrifice was worth it. Vanessa, my assistant Maya burst through the door of my office waving a tablet. Forbes wants to feature us in their 30 under 30s section. They're impressed by our growth numbers. I nearly dropped my coffee. Are you serious? Dead serious. They specifically mentioned how we've helped over 1,000 women start their own businesses through our mentorship program. The irony wasn't lost on me. A flashback hit me like a wave, my father's voice echoing in his study the day I'd asked him to invest in my company. This is ridiculous, Vanessa, he'd said, not even looking up from his newspaper. Women's empowerment? That's not a real business model. Come back when you have a serious proposition. Maya's voice pulled me back to the present. Also, Sierra called again. I tensed. Sierra, my former friend who'd launched a competing wellness brand 6 months after seeing my success, had been trying to reach me for weeks. What did she want? She's suggesting a partnership. Says it would be mutually beneficial. Maya made air quotes with her fingers. The same Sierra who told everyone I stole her business idea? I shook my head. Not happening. My phone buzzed, Riley's face lighting up the screen. I hadn't spoken to her in months, not since she'd defended our mother's latest criticism of my life choices. "Hey, sis," I answered, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Van, I just saw the article about your company in Business Weekly," she said, her voice excited. "Why didn't you tell me you're expanding to 3 new cities?" Would anyone in the family have actually cared? Silence stretched between us before she spoke again. "Mum saw it too. She kept the magazine." I swallowed hard, pushing down the hope that threatened to rise. Let me guess, she's still waiting for me to fail? No, I think she's starting to realize she was wrong. Even Lionel mentioned your success at dinner last week. "Speaking of Lionel," I said, changing the subject, "how's his investment firm doing? Still telling everyone I'm making a mistake while he plays with other people's money?" Riley's hesitation was telling. I probably shouldn't say anything. Before I could press further, Maya knocked on my door again, pointing urgently at her watch. I had a meeting with potential investors in 15 minutes. "Riley, I have to go. Actual business to run, you know." "Wait," she said quickly. "Will you come to Dad's birthday dinner next week, please? Things are different now." I thought about all the milestones I'd celebrated alone, signing my first office lease, landing my first major client, seeing my company's name in print. Where were they then? "I'll think about it," I said finally, ending the call. The rest of the day flew by in a blur of meetings, client calls, and planning sessions for our next retreat. At midnight, I finally locked up the office, the city lights twinkling below our high-rise location. My phone pinged with a notification. An email from Sierra. "Vanessa, I know we have our differences, but we need to talk. It's important. Things aren't what they seem with certain people we both know. Please call me." I deleted the email without responding. Success had taught me one valuable lesson. Some bridges are better left burned. As I drove home, I passed the street leading to my parents' house. The same house where they'd dismissed my dreams, where Lionel and Delaney had smirked at my plans, where I'd finally found the courage to walk away. My company's latest financial report sat in my bag, numbers that proved every doubter wrong. Sometimes I imagined sending copies to everyone who'd laughed at me, but success was proving to be the sweetest revenge. Little did I know that fate was about to hand me an even better opportunity for payback, because sometimes karma doesn't just knock. It kicks down the door and demands attention. I pulled into my parking spot, exhausted but satisfied. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to show my family exactly what their failure of a daughter had become. The universe, as I was about to discover, had quite the sense of humor. The call came at 3 a.m., jolting me awake. Riley's name flashed on my screen, and my stomach dropped. Nobody calls at this hour with good news. "Van," her voice cracked, "everything's falling apart." I sat up, fully alert. "What's wrong?" "It's Lionel. His firm. There was an investigation. The SEC found irregularities. They're freezing all assets." She was crying now. "But that's not even the worst part." "What do you mean?" "Dad invested everything with him. The house, his retirement fund, everything. Mum's hysterical. Delaney's parents lost their savings too, and..." She hesitated. "I put my startup money in his fund." The room seemed to spin. "How much are we talking about?" "Millions. All gone. And there's more. Sierra's company was one of his biggest investors. She's been trying to warn you." Suddenly, Sierra's cryptic messages made sense. I felt sick. "Where are you now?" I asked, already pulling on clothes. "At Mum and Dad's. Lionel's here too. Delaney's screaming at him, and Mum keeps saying she can't breathe. Can you please come?" I grabbed my keys, torn between satisfaction and genuine concern. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. The scene at my parents' house was chaos. Delaney was pacing the living room, mascara streaking her face. My mother sat rigid in her armchair, looking older than I'd ever seen her. Dad stood by the window, silent and shell-shocked. Lionel hunched on the couch, head in his hands. "Oh, look who's here!" Delaney spat when I walked in. "Come to gloat." "That's enough," Riley snapped, surprising everyone. "Vanessa's here because I called her." My father turned from the window. "Vanessa," he said, his voice hollow, "your brother. He made some mistakes," Lionel cut in, "but I can fix this. I just need time." "Time?" Delaney whirled on him. "The FBI is involved. We're ruined. My parents are ruined." My mother finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "We'll have to sell the house. Everything we built." I stood there watching my family crumble. The revenge fantasy I'd harbored suddenly felt hollow. These broken people before me weren't the mighty judges who'd condemned my choices. They were just humans who'd put their faith in the wrong person. "There might be a way," I heard myself say. All eyes turned to me. "What do you mean?" Riley asked. I took a deep breath. "My company's doing well. Very well. I could help, but what?" My mother leaned forward, hope flickering in her eyes. "There would be conditions." I met each of their gazes. "Strict ones." Lionel stood up. "We don't need your charity." "Sit down," Dad barked, the first sign of emotion he'd shown all night. "Let her speak." I walked to the center of the room, feeling the weight of power shift. "I can help with living expenses, legal fees, and maybe even save the house, but you'll all need to work for it." "Work?" Delaney's voice dripped with disdain. "What kind of work?" "My wellness retreats need staff, real people who understand what it means to lose everything and rebuild. You'll work as volunteers, sharing your stories, helping other women avoid the same mistakes." The silence was deafening. "You want us to confess our failures to strangers?" My mother looked horrified. "I want you to help others while helping yourselves, to understand what real value is." I turned to Lionel. "And you'll need to make full restitution to everyone you hurt, starting with Sierra." "This is ridiculous," Delaney started, but Lionel grabbed her arm. "We'll do it," he said quietly. My father nodded slowly. "Whatever it takes." My mother just stared at her hands, tears falling silently. Riley stepped forward. "When do we start?" I pulled out my phone and opened my calendar. "There's a retreat next weekend, but first we need to talk to my lawyers and set everything in writing." I looked at each of them. No shortcuts this time. As I drove home that night, my phone buzzed with a text from Riley. "Thank you, but please tell me this isn't just about revenge." I stared at her message for a long time before responding. It's about justice, and maybe healing, for all of us. The sun was rising as I pulled into my parking spot, casting long shadows across the city. In a few hours, I'd need to tell Maya to clear my schedule and call the lawyers. But for now, I sat in my car, watching the dawn break over a world that had shifted on its axis. Sometimes karma doesn't just come full circle, it hands you the pen to write the next chapter yourself. The conference room felt smaller than usual as my family filed in, looking like defendants at a trial. My lawyer, Rachel, spread documents across the polished table while Maya distributed copies to everyone. "These are the terms," I began, standing at the head of the table. "Read them carefully." Lionel scanned the first page, his face darkening. 6 months of mandatory participation, weekly sessions. "Keep reading," I said, watching their expressions change as they reached the financial details. My mother gasped. "This is generous." "It's more than generous," Rachel interjected. "Ms. Simpson is essentially offering a lifeline while taking on significant risk to her company's reputation." Delaney slammed her copy down. "This is humiliating. You want me to share my journey of financial recovery with your clients? I'm not some cautionary tale." "Actually," I leaned forward, "that's exactly what you are. All of you. The wealthy family who look down on others while building their fortune on sand. Now you have a choice. Swallow your pride or drown in debt." "Vanessa," my father's voice wavered. "Some of these requirements, greeting guests, serving meals, maintenance work. Basic human interactions, Dad. The kind you thought were beneath you when I started out." Riley was the only one nodding as she read. "This makes sense. We need to understand value from the ground up." "There's more." Maya stepped forward, clicking through a presentation. "Each of you will be assigned specific roles based on your experiences." The room tensed as their assignments appeared on screen. Lionel, you'll lead our financial responsibility workshops, share exactly how pride and greed can destroy lives. I watched him flinch. Delaney, you'll assist with our first-time entrepreneur program, showing them what not to do. And me? My mother's voice was barely audible. You'll work with women struggling with family expectations and societal pressure. Who better than someone who nearly destroyed her daughter's spirit trying to maintain appearances? She looked away, tears forming. Your father will handle maintenance and groundskeeping. Riley, you'll assist Maya with administration. I paused. Any questions? Lionel stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. This is revenge, plain and simple. No, I countered. Revenge would be letting you all suffer the consequences of your actions alone. This is an opportunity for growth. And if we refuse? Delaney challenged. Rachel cleared her throat. Then you face bankruptcy proceedings alone. The house goes into foreclosure and Mr. Leonard faces potential criminal charges without any support for his defense. Silence fell over the room. I'll do it, Riley said firmly, picking up a pen. One by one they signed, my father first, then my mother, her hand trembling. Lionel and Delaney were last, their signatures angry slashes across the paper. The first retreat starts Friday, Maya announced. You'll need to arrive by 7 a.m. for orientation. 7? My mother looked horrified. But welcome to the real world, Mom, I cut her off, where success requires more than just marrying well and judging others. As they filed out, Riley hung back. Van, I know they deserve this, but what? Just remember you're better than their worst moments. Don't let this change who you are. I watched through my office window as they left the building, my family now effectively my employees. The power shift was complete, but Riley's words echoed in my mind. My phone buzzed, a message from Sierra. Heard about the deal with your family. Smart move. Can we talk now? There's still more you need to know. Before I could respond, Maya entered with a stack of papers. The press release about the new Family Wisdom Initiative is ready for your review. And the first group of retreat participants is confirmed. 30 women, all excited about learning from real-world experiences. I smiled, imagining my mother serving breakfast to women she would have previously snubbed at country club meetings. Perfect. One more thing, Maya hesitated. Lionel's wife, Delaney. She's pregnant. She didn't want anyone to know yet, but I thought you should be aware. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. A baby. An innocent life about to be born into this mess of pride and consequences. I sat down heavily in my chair. Make sure her duties are appropriate for her condition. And add prenatal wellness sessions to her schedule. Of course. Maya paused at the door. You're doing the right thing, you know. They need this wake-up call. As the sun set over the city, I wondered if Riley was right. Was I really better than their worst moments? Or was I just better at disguising my revenge as redemption? Friday would tell. And something told me this was just the beginning of a very complicated journey. 3 weeks into the Family Wisdom Initiative, I stood at the back of our main conference room, watching my mother address a group of women. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. I spent 30 years judging my daughter for choosing independence over marriage, she said, her voice carrying across the hushed room. I thought I was protecting her. Instead, I almost lost her. A woman in the front row wiped away tears. Others nodded in understanding. Mrs. Andrea, one participant raised her hand. How did it feel when your daughter became more successful than your son? I held my breath, waiting for her rehearsed answer. But what came next surprised me. It felt like a mirror being held up to my face, my mother admitted. Every criticism I'd ever made, every disapproving look, they all came back to haunt me. And now? She glanced at me. Now I'm learning from her. The session ended with a standing ovation. As the room cleared, Riley appeared beside me. She's different, I murmured. They all are, Riley replied. Even Dad. Yesterday he fixed a broken chair and looked proud. Actually proud. Not just rich person proud. A commotion from the hallway interrupted us. Delaney's voice rang out, sharp and angry. I will not be treated like this. I'm carrying your grandchild. We rushed out to find Delaney confronting my mother, who stood her ground with unexpected grace. Sweetheart, my mother said calmly, being pregnant doesn't excuse you from basic kindness. That participant asked for water, not a personal attack. Do you know who I am? Who we were? Yes, my mother replied. We were privileged people who confused money with worth. Now we're learning the difference. I stepped forward, but Riley held me back. Let them handle it, she whispered. Delaney turned to storm off, but stopped short at the sight of Sierra walking down the hallway. What is she doing here? Delaney's face went pale. Sierra smiled coldly. I'm here to discuss restitution with Lionel. You know, the money your husband stole from my company? He didn't steal, Delaney started. Save it, Sierra cut her off. The SEC documents say otherwise. She turned to me. Ready for that meeting? I nodded, leading Sierra to my office. Through the glass walls, I could see Delaney sink into a chair, my mother awkwardly patting her shoulder. Your family's quite the show, Sierra said, settling into a chair. But that's not why I'm here. The restitution is part of it, she interrupted. But there's more. Your brother didn't act alone. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? Someone helped him hide the money. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. She pulled out her phone, showing me emails. Someone close to your family. As I read the emails, my hands started shaking. This can't be right. Your father's signature is on everything, Vanessa. He wasn't just an investor, he was a co-conspirator. The world tilted sideways. Through the glass, I could see my father in the garden patiently teaching a group of women about maintaining the herb garden we used for our organic cooking classes. He looked peaceful. Does Lionel know? Sierra shook her head. Your brother thinks he's protecting your father, but your father was protecting himself. A knock at the door made us both jump. Maya entered with a concerned look. Sorry to interrupt, but there's something you need to see. Lionel's financial responsibility workshop, it's going viral. She held up her tablet, showing a video of my brother, tears streaming down his face, telling his story to a packed room. I thought I was untouchable, his voice cracked in the video. I thought money made me better than everyone else. I was wrong, and I hurt everyone I loved because of it. Well, Sierra said softly, looks like at least one family member is finding redemption. I stood up, my mind racing. I need time to process this, the information about my father. Won't stay secret forever, Sierra finished. The investigators are closing in. You need to decide what you're going to do. As she left, Riley entered, excitement on her face. Van? You won't believe what just happened. Mom actually apologized to Delaney for how she treated her when she first married Lionel. They're both crying in the break room. I stared at the emails on my desk, then at my family through the glass walls. All of them playing their parts, some finding genuine change, others hiding deeper secrets. Riley, I said slowly, what would you do if you discovered that helping someone meant hurting someone else? She studied my face. This isn't just about revenge anymore, is it? No, I replied, watching my father tend to his herbs, wondering how many other things he'd carefully cultivated besides his lies. It's about truth, and it's about to get much more complicated. Dad, we need to talk. I stood in the retreat's garden watching him prune the lavender bushes he'd come to love over the past month. He straightened up slowly, wiping his hands on his work pants. The morning sun caught the new calluses on his palms, hands that used to only hold golf clubs and stock reports. About the SEC investigation, I continued. About what you did. The pruning shears clattered to the ground. Who told you? Does it matter? What matters is you let Lionel take all the blame. Vanessa, you don't understand. Then help me understand. My voice echoed across the garden. Help me understand why my father, who lectured us about integrity our whole lives, helped orchestrate a financial fraud. He sank onto a nearby bench. It started small, just a few adjustments to help Lionel's numbers look better. Then it grew. Before I knew it, Before you knew it, you were hiding millions, destroying lives. I was protecting our family name. No. I stepped closer. You were protecting your pride, just like when you dismissed my business plans, just like when you— Ms. Simpson, Maya's voice interrupted us. The investigators are here. They're asking for both Mr. Harold and Lionel. My father's face went ash white. Through the garden windows, I could see two suited figures in the lobby, badges visible on their belts. Dad, I said quietly, you have a choice. You can come clean now, or— What's going on? Lionel appeared behind us, Delaney hovering anxiously at his side. Dad, why are the feds here for you? Our father stood, straightening his gardening apron with trembling hands. Son, I need to tell you something. But before he could continue, my mother burst into the garden. Harold, don't you dare! We'll lose everything. We already have, I cut in. The only thing left to lose is our integrity. Again, Lionel looked between us, realization dawning on his face. Dad, what did you do? The next hour unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. In the conference room, my father confessed everything to the investigators, while Lionel sat in stunned silence. My mother wept quietly in the corner as Delaney gripped Riley's hand so hard her knuckles went white. Both parties will need to surrender their passports, one investigator said, making notes. Given your cooperation and the restitution program already in place through Ms. Simpson's company, we'll recommend minimal custody time, but— Custody? My mother's head snapped up. Prison? Mom, I said gently, what did you expect? Sierra, who'd been quietly observing, stepped forward. I'm willing to work with them on the restitution terms, given the circumstances. The circumstances? Delaney stood up, her pregnancy now visible beneath her flowing top. My child will be born while both their father and grandfather are in prison. How's that for circumstances? Lionel reached for her hand. Dee, please, this isn't helping. No, you know what would have helped. She spun to face my father. If you had been honest from the start, if you hadn't dragged my husband into your schemes. That's enough, Riley interrupted. We need solutions, not blame. I looked at my family, really looked at them. My father slumped in defeat. My brother facing the consequences of both his actions and his trust. My mother, her carefully constructed world crumbling. And through it all, the retreat participants outside the window going about their transformative journeys, unaware of the drama unfolding inside. I have a proposition, I said, drawing everyone's attention. We modify the current arrangement. Dad and Lionel will need to face legal consequences, but the retreat program continues. Mum, Delaney, Riley, you keep working here. Keep helping others learn from our family's mistakes. And what about the baby? Delaney whispered. We'll make sure they know their father and grandfather as men who faced their mistakes, not as men who ran from them. The investigators exchanged glances and nodded. That could work in their favor during sentencing. As they led my father and brother out to process the paperwork, Sierra touched my arm. You're doing the right thing. Am I? I watched my mother collapse into Riley's arms. Because it feels like I'm destroying what's left of my family. No, Sierra replied. You're forcing them to rebuild on a foundation of truth this time. It's painful, but necessary. Through the window, I could see the garden my father had tended so carefully. Like the herbs he'd planted, truth needed time to take root and grow. But unlike his financial deceptions, these roots would be strong, real, and lasting. Maya appeared with fresh contracts and paperwork. It was time to write the next chapter of our family's story, one where redemption came through honesty, not hiding. The courtroom fell silent as the judge prepared to deliver the sentences. 3 months had passed since the truth came out, and now everything would change again. In the matter of federal securities fraud, the judge began. This court sentences Harold Simpson to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. My mother's sharp intake of breath echoed through the room. Riley squeezed my hand. For defendant Lionel Simpson, Considering his cooperation and lesser involvement, 12 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release. Delaney, now visibly pregnant, buried her face in her hands. The baby would be 3 months old before Leonel could hold them. "Your Honor," my father stood, his voice shaking. "Before you conclude, may I address the court?" The judge nodded. "I've spent the past 3 months working in my daughter's wellness retreat, tending gardens and watching women rebuild their lives. Every day I saw the kind of courage I lacked. People facing their mistakes honestly." He turned to face the gallery. "I failed as a father long before I failed as a businessman. I taught my children that appearance matters more than integrity. Today, I'm learning the opposite from them." Leonel stood next to him. "And I learned it too late that success built on lies isn't success at all." As the bailiff led them away, Delaney rushed forward. "Wait, please, just one moment." The judge nodded, and Leonel turned back. Delaney pressed something into his hand, a sonogram picture. "It's a girl," she whispered. The doors closed behind them, leaving us in stunned silence until my mother's voice cut through the quiet. "This is your fault," she hissed at me. "If you hadn't forced us into that retreat program, if you hadn't brought Sierra in—" "Stop it!" Riley's voice was sharp. "Van didn't force Dad to commit fraud. She didn't make Leonel lie. She gave us a chance to make things right." "Right?" My mother laughed bitterly. "My husband and son are going to prison. How is that right?" "Because they're finally facing consequences," I said quietly. "Just like we're all facing the consequences of the lies we lived with." Sierra approached us, her lawyer beside her. "The restitution agreement still stands. The retreat program is helping repay the investors, and your family's story is actually attracting more participants." "Our tragedy is your marketing tool," Delaney snapped. "No," Sierra replied calmly. "Your redemption is inspiring others. There's a difference." Back at the retreat center that evening, I found my mother sitting in the garden my father had created. She touched a lavender sprig gently. "He called me last night," she said without looking up. "Said he finally understands why you chose this path. Said watching women find their strength here made him realize how wrong we were about you." "Mom." "No, let me finish." She stood facing me. "I was so focused on what other people thought that I never thought about what was right. Your father did the same thing with money. We taught our children all the wrong lessons." "Not all of them," Riley appeared with 3 cups of tea. "You taught us family sticks together. We're just redefining what that means." Delaney joined us, her hand resting on her belly. "The baby kicked today during my session with the entrepreneurs group, right when I was telling them about how status and money aren't what make you valuable." "She's learning already," Riley smiled. Maya rushed out to the garden. "Vanessa, you need to see this. The New York Times wants to do a feature on the retreat program. They're calling it From Fraud to Freedom, a family's journey to redemption." "No," I said, surprising everyone. "We're not doing that. But the publicity, this isn't about publicity anymore." I looked at my mother, at Delaney, at Riley. "This is about healing. Real healing." My mother nodded slowly. "For the first time in my life, I don't care what people think. I just care about making things right." As night fell over the retreat center, we sat in the garden my father had planted, drinking tea and planning for Leonel's daughter's future. Not a future built on appearances or wealth, but on truth and resilience. My phone buzzed. A message from the prison. Dad had been assigned to teach gardening in the prison's rehabilitation program. Leonel was joining a financial literacy initiative for inmates. "They're still teaching," I said, showing the message to everyone. "Just different lessons now." Delaney touched her belly again. "When she asks about her father and grandfather, we'll tell her they were brave enough to change. That's worth more than any fortune they lost." The lavender swayed in the evening breeze, its scent a reminder that growth comes in unexpected ways. Sometimes it takes losing everything to find what really matters. And sometimes I realized revenge isn't about making others suffer. It's about making them see the truth, even when it hurts. The prison visiting room buzzed with quiet conversation as I sat across from my father, watching him hold his granddaughter for the first time. Baby Emma's tiny hand wrapped around his finger, while Delaney hovered nearby, her protective instincts warring with the need to let her daughter know her grandfather. "She has Lionel's eyes," Dad said softly, then looked up at me. "Thank you for arranging this." "The retreat's lawyer made it happen," I replied. "Apparently our program's success carries some weight now." "I heard," he nodded. "Your mother told me about the Governor's Award for Social Impact and about the new locations opening up. 3 more retreats by spring," I confirmed. "Riley's managing the expansion." A guard approached our table. "Mr. Harold, your gardening class starts in 10 minutes. Dad carefully handed Emma back to Delaney. "The vegetables we planted last month are ready for harvest. We're donating them to local shelters." "Just like we do at the retreat," I smiled. "I learned from the best." He stood, then hesitated. "Vanessa, when I get out, would there be room for 1 more gardener at your retreat?" "We'll see," I said, but we both knew the answer was yes. Later that day, I walked into our main conference room to find my mother leading a session on redefining success. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Society told me that my daughter's worth was tied to marriage and status," she was saying. I told her the same thing. We were both wrong. True worth comes from being authentic, from having the courage to stand up for your beliefs. The room erupted in applause. As the participants filed out, Sierra entered with a stack of documents. "Final restitution payments," she announced. "Everything's settled. Your family's program actually helped recover more than the original losses." "We all won something more valuable anyway," my mother said, joining us. "Perspective." Maya burst in, excitement radiating from her. "Lionel's program proposal got approved. The prison wants him to expand his financial literacy classes to all minimum security facilities in the state." "He finally found his real calling," Delaney added, rocking Emma, "teaching others to avoid his mistakes." Riley appeared with fresh coffee for everyone. "Speaking of teaching, guess who just signed up for our next retreat? Aunt Patricia. You know, the one who used to call Vanessa a rebellious disappointment at every family gathering." "Karma really does come full circle," Sierra laughed. I looked around the room at these women, my once judgmental mother now empowering others, my former rival Sierra, now a trusted ally, Delaney transforming from entitled princess to conscious parent, Riley growing into a confident leader. "Van," Riley touched my arm, "there's someone here to see you." In the doorway stood a young woman, barely 20. "Ms. Vanessa? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm here because of your father's story. My dad's doing the same thing, hiding money, lying to investors. I don't want to end up like your family did, but I don't want to lose mine either." My mother stepped forward. "Sweetheart, sit down. Let us tell you what real loss and real gain looks like." As they gathered around the young woman, I slipped out to the garden. The lavender my father planted had spread, creating a purple haven of peace. My phone buzzed with a message from Lionel. "Just taught my biggest class yet. One guy said I saved his family by showing him where his choices would lead." "Maybe that's what this was all about," I typed back. "It was about growth, just not the kind we originally planned." The sun was setting over the retreat center, casting long shadows across the garden my father built, the classrooms where my mother found her voice, the spaces where Delaney learned humility, and the offices where Riley discovered her strength. This wasn't the revenge I'd imagined when I first offered to help my family. It was something better, a transformation that touched not just them, but countless others. Emma's cry echoed from inside, followed by Delaney's gentle shushing. Soon she'd be walking these gardens, growing up in a family that had learned the hard way what really matters. I picked a sprig of lavender, twirling it between my fingers. The sweet scent reminded me of something my father said during his last court appearance. Sometimes you have to lose your way completely to find a better path. We'd all lost our way. We'd all found something better, and maybe that was the point all along. Maya appeared in the garden. "Ready? The evening session's about to start." I nodded, tucking the lavender into my pocket. It was time to help another group of women write their own stories of transformation. After all, that's what growing through the cracks in our broken places is all about.
I always knew my sister would try to ruin my life someday. I just didn't expect her to wait until my wedding day to do it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this mess really started. Thea, could you please just once try to be more like your sister? My mother's familiar refrain echoed through our kitchen as I scraped burnt cookies into the trash. At 28, you'd think I'd be immune to the comparison game by now. But some wounds never really heal. They just scab over. Mom, I'm a successful pediatric nurse. I have my own house. I have an amazing son. What more do you want from me? I tried keeping my voice level, though my hands shook slightly as I gripped the cookie sheet. Well, Sylvia had already made partner at her law firm by your age, she replied, straightening the perfectly aligned photos on the fridge, all featuring my sister's gleaming smile. And she did it while maintaining a proper marriage. I bit my tongue. Being a single mom wasn't exactly in my life plan, but Tommy was the best thing that ever happened to me. Speaking of Sylvia, how's she doing? I heard about Ian leaving. Mom's face darkened. She's devastated naturally. He just walked out 3 months ago, no warning. She's barely eating. She paused, giving me that look that always made me feel 2 inches tall. You should call her more often. She needs her sister right now. Right, I muttered, checking my phone. I was already late meeting my best friend Malik for coffee. I've got to run, Mom. Tommy's with his dad today, and I promised Malik. That man, she interrupted, clicking her tongue. I don't understand why you spend so much time with him. People talk, you know. I grabbed my purse, fighting the urge to roll my eyes. Malik's gay, Mom, and he's been my rock since Tommy was born. Unlike some people, the bell above the cafe door chimed as I rushed in 20 minutes late. Malik waved from our usual corner booth, 2 steaming mugs already waiting. You look like you need something stronger than coffee, he said as I slid into the seat. Just another lovely morning with Mother Dearest, I sighed, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. Apparently, I'm still failing at being Sylvia 2.0. Honey, being Sylvia 1.0 isn't working out so great for Sylvia right now, Malik pointed out, stirring his chai latte. Have you heard from Ian at all? My stomach did a weird flip at Ian's name. No, why would I? Because he's been asking about you. I nearly choked on my coffee. What? Don't play dumb. He came into the gallery yesterday, asking if you ever stopped by. Malik leaned forward, lowering his voice. He looked rough, Thea. Said he needed to talk to you about something important. No, absolutely not. I shook my head firmly. Whatever drama's going on between him and Sylvia, I want no part of it. But life had other plans. Later that evening, as I was tucking Tommy into bed, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Ian standing on my porch, looking exactly as rough as Malik had described. Thea, please, he called softly through the door. I know you're home. I need to tell you something. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. Ian's usually neat appearance was disheveled, his eyes haunted. You shouldn't be here. I know. He ran a hand through his hair. But I couldn't live with myself if I didn't tell you the truth about why I left Sylvia. Ian, she's been lying about everything. His voice cracked. The miscarriage she had last year, it wasn't a miscarriage. She had an abortion. She's been having an affair for years, Thea, with someone named Jason. My world tilted sideways. What? That's not all. He took a deep breath. The reason I'm telling you this, I've been in love with you since the day you helped me pick out Sylvia's engagement ring. I was just too much of a coward to admit it then. I stood there, frozen, as 5 years of family dynamics suddenly shifted like pieces of a kaleidoscope, and somewhere in the back of my mind, A small voice whispered that this was only the beginning of the storm. "You need to leave," I managed to say, even as my heart raced. "Now." As I closed the door on Ian's pleading face, my phone buzzed with a text from Sylvia. "We need to talk. Tomorrow. Don't you dare ignore me." I sank to the floor, my back against the door, wondering how my perfectly ordinary life had just exploded into chaos. But I had no idea then just how deep this rabbit hole would go, or how many secrets would come tumbling out before it was all over. I never made it to that meeting with Sylvia. Instead, life took an unexpected turn that morning when Ian showed up at my workplace, clutching coffee and wearing the most determined expression I'd ever seen on his face. "5 minutes," he said, holding out a cup. "That's all I'm asking." The pediatric ward was quiet, and I was due for a break anyway. "Fine, 5 minutes." We sat in the hospital garden, the spring air crisp around us. Ian didn't waste any time. "I filed for divorce yesterday," he said, staring into his coffee. "I know it seems fast, but Sylvia and I have been over for a long time, and I can't stop thinking about what I told you last night. Ian, I'm your soon-to-be ex-wife's sister. This is crazy." "Is it?" He turned to face me. "Tell me you've never felt this connection between us. All those family dinners, all those times you were the only one who really saw me." "Stop," I whispered, but my heart wasn't in it. "Have dinner with me, just once. If you feel nothing, I'll never bother you again." That dinner changed everything. One date turned into 2, then 3, and suddenly we were stealing kisses in parking lots and sharing secret smiles across rooms. It felt like walking on air until the first threatening note appeared under my windshield wiper. "Home-wrecking whores get what they deserve," it read in cut-out magazine letters. "It has to be Sylvia," I told Malik over lunch, showing him the note. "Who else would do this? Your sister's always been dramatic, but this is next level." He studied the paper. "Have you told Ian?" "Not yet. He's already dealing with enough. The divorce is getting ugly." More notes followed. "Watch your back. Karma's coming." Each one more ominous than the last. But then Ian did something that made me forget all about them. He proposed. It happened on a random Tuesday. Tommy was at his dad's, and Ian had cooked dinner at my place. As we cleared the dishes, he suddenly dropped to one knee. "I know it's fast," he said, pulling out a simple silver ring. "I know people will talk, but I love you, Thea. I love your strength, your kindness, your heart. I love how you are with Tommy. Will you marry me?" My yes was barely out before my phone exploded with texts. Somehow, Sylvia already knew. "You backstabbing bitch." Her voice screamed through the speaker when I finally answered. "How dare you?" "Sylvia, calm down." "Calm down? You're engaged to my husband." "Ex-husband," I corrected. "And you cheated on him for years." The line went dead. Minutes later, my mother called. "How could you do this to your sister?" she demanded. "Have you no shame?" "Mom, you don't know the whole story." "I know enough. You've always been jealous of Sylvia, always trying to take what's hers." I hung up, hands shaking. Ian wrapped his arms around me. "We knew this wouldn't be easy." "Maybe we should wait," I suggested. "Give it more time." "No." His voice was firm. "I'm done letting Sylvia control my life, our life. Let's get married next month. Small ceremony, just close friends." That night after Ian left, I found another note taped to my door. But this one was different. "I know what you did 5 years ago," it read. "Soon everyone will know." My blood ran cold. There was only one secret from 5 years ago, and I'd buried it deep, or so I thought. The next morning, Malik helped me plan the wedding while I tried to ignore the growing knot in my stomach. "Something's not right," he said, watching me jump at every sound. You're hiding something. I'm fine, I lied. Just wedding jitters. But as I looked at wedding venues on my laptop, an email arrived from an anonymous address. Inside was a photo that made my heart stop. Me, 5 years ago, leaving a clinic with Jason, Sylvia's secret lover. My phone buzzed with a text from Sylvia. Found your weakness, little sister. Still want to marry my husband? I stared at the message, my hands steady for the first time in days. If Sylvia wanted to play this game, fine. But she had no idea what other secrets I'd discovered in those old letters. Secrets that could destroy her completely. Book the venue, I told Malik, a strange calm settling over me. For next month, it's time everyone learned the truth. He studied my face. Thea, what are you planning? I smiled, thinking of the DNA test results hidden in my desk drawer. Let's just say Sylvia isn't the only one with secrets. The next few weeks became a twisted game of cat and mouse. Sylvia escalated her threats, but I had my own ammunition ready. I just needed the right moment to use it. I found her waiting outside Tommy's school one afternoon, leaning against her Mercedes like she owned the place. What are you doing here? I demanded, stepping between her and the school entrance. Can't an aunt visit her nephew? Her smile was razor sharp, though I suppose we should confirm if that's really what I am to him. Don't you dare bring Tommy into this. Oh, but he's already involved, isn't he? She adjusted her designer sunglasses. How is Jason these days? Still working at that clinic? My heart hammered, but I kept my voice steady. Funny you should mention Jason. I had coffee with him yesterday. The smile slipped from her face. You're lying. Am I? He had some very interesting things to say about you. About 5 years ago. About 9 months before. Shut up. She grabbed my arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my skin. You don't know anything. I know everything, Sylvia. Every single thing. The school bell rang, and I pulled away as children started pouring out. Tommy ran toward us, then stopped short when he saw Sylvia. Hey, buddy, I called, trying to sound normal. Ready to go? Is everything okay, Mom? His eyes darted between us. Perfect, sweetie. Aunt Sylvia was just leaving. That evening, Ian came over looking worried. I got fired today, he said as soon as I opened the door. The partners claimed they found evidence I was stealing client information. Sylvia, I growled, she must have friends at your firm. It gets worse. He pulled out his phone, showing me an email. Someone sent this to every partner. It was a doctored photo, making it look like Ian was sharing confidential documents. She's trying to destroy you, I said, to stop the wedding. I don't care about the job. He pulled me close, but I'm worried about what else she might do. My phone buzzed. Another anonymous email. This time it contained a video, security footage from the clinic, dated 5 years ago. Me and Jason talking intensely in the parking lot. I should tell you something, I said, turning to Ian, about that time. But before I could continue, there was a knock at the door. My mother stood there, looking like she'd aged 10 years. Is it true? She demanded, barging in. What Sylvia told me about Tommy? Whatever she told you is a lie. She says he's Ian's, that you two had an affair years ago. Her voice broke. That's why you're really getting married, isn't it? To cover up your sin? Mom, stop. I grabbed the DNA test results from my desk. Read this, all of it. She sank onto the couch, hands shaking as she read. Her face went from angry to confused to shocked. This can't be right, she whispered. It is, and there's more. I sat beside her. Remember when Sylvia said she lost that baby last year? It wasn't Ian's, and she didn't lose it. How do you know all this? Because Jason told me. Because I was there. Because... I stopped as Tommy appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Mom, Why is everyone yelling? Go back to bed, sweetheart. Everything's fine. After tucking him in again, I returned to find my mother gone and Ian staring at the DNA results. When were you going to tell me about this? He asked quietly. At the right time, when I had everything in place. And when's that? I smiled grimly. At the wedding. When Sylvia tries whatever she's planning, I'll be ready. You're playing a dangerous game, he warned. No, I corrected. I'm finishing one she started years ago. Later that night, after everyone left, I called Malik. The pieces are falling into place, I told him. I need one more favor. Anything. Find Jason. Tell him it's time to make things right. Are you sure about this? He asked. Once you start this avalanche? Sylvia thought she could bury me with my own secrets, I said, looking at the photo of Tommy on my desk. But she forgot one thing. What's that? I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago, and I'm done living in her shadow. As if on cue, another text from Sylvia arrived. Last chance to call off the wedding, little sister. Or should I start telling people what really happened at that clinic? I typed back 4 words. Bring it on, big sister. The game was nearly over. In 2 weeks at my wedding, all the secrets would come out, and only one of us would be left standing. 1 week before the wedding, I found myself in Malik's gallery, surrounded by old boxes from our parents' attic. He'd convinced Mom to let us look for family photos for the wedding. Found anything interesting? Malik asked, bringing me coffee. More than interesting. I held up a stack of letters, my hands trembling. These were hidden in Sylvia's old yearbook. They're from Jason, dated 6 years ago, before she even met Ian. Malik sat beside me as I read aloud. My dearest Sylvia, I know you're worried about what your parents will think, but this baby is a blessing. I stopped, my throat tight. She was pregnant, with Jason's baby, before Ian. Keep reading. I know you're scared, but we can make this work. Your parents' approval isn't worth giving up our child. I shuffled through more letters. The last one is angry. Jason begging her not to go through with an abortion. But she did. No. I pulled out a photograph that had been stuck between the pages. Look at this. The photo showed a newborn in a hospital bassinet. On the back was written, Emily 515, St. Mary's Hospital. Holy shit, Malik whispered. She had the baby. And gave it up for adoption. Then met Ian 3 months later, pretending to be the perfect daughter my parents always wanted. My phone buzzed, a text from Jason. I'm in town, meeting you tomorrow at 2. The usual place. The next day, I sat in the same clinic parking lot where everything had changed 5 years ago. Jason's car pulled up right on time. You look good, Thea, he said, sliding into the passenger seat. Better than the last time we met here. When you helped me expose Sylvia's affair to Ian. He nodded. I'm sorry about all this. I never thought she'd try to use that against you. She thinks she's so clever, I said, pulling out the letters, but she forgot about these. Jason's face darkened as he looked at them. She told me she destroyed these. Did you ever find her? Your daughter? Emily? His voice cracked. Yes, she's with a good family in Seattle. They send me photos sometimes. I'm not supposed to, but... He pulled out his phone, showing me a picture of a smiling 5-year-old with Sylvia's eyes. Does Sylvia know? No. She made it clear she wanted nothing to do with us. He hesitated. That's why I helped you back then. When you caught us together, when you threatened to tell Ian, I was angry at her, at everything. And now? Now I want the truth out. All of it. What do you need me to do? I outlined my plan. By the time we finished talking, the sun was setting. That night, Ian found me at my kitchen table, surrounded by papers. You missed the cake tasting, he said softly. I'm sorry, I got caught up in... I gestured at the mess. He picked up the photo of Emily. "Who's this?" "Your wife's daughter." His face went blank. "What?" I told him everything, about Jason, about Emily, about the letters, about how Sylvia had hidden a child to maintain her perfect image. "All those years," he whispered. "All those lies. There's more." I took a deep breath. "Remember when Sylvia's threatening notes mentioned something from 5 years ago? About me and Jason at the clinic?" He nodded slowly. "I wasn't there for me. I was there because I'd caught them together. Jason convinced me not to tell you right away. He wanted to handle it himself, but Sylvia threatened him with never seeing Emily again." "So that's how you knew about their affair? All this time?" "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I wanted to protect Tommy from all this mess." Ian pulled me into a hug. "No more secrets?" "No more secrets." My phone lit up with another anonymous email. This time it was a series of photos. Me and Jason meeting today, sitting in my car, talking intensely. Sylvia's text followed. "Caught you with my lover again, sister dear. Wonder what Ian will think." I smiled, forwarding her the photo of Emily. "Wonder what Mom and Dad will think." Her response came instantly. "You wouldn't dare." "Watch me, at the wedding. Unless you want to talk." "Fine. Tomorrow, noon, Mom and Dad's house." I showed the exchange to Ian. "It's a trap," he said. "I know." I gathered the letters and photos. "But I'm done running from her. It's time to end this." "Be careful," he warned. "A cornered animal is the most dangerous." If only I'd known then just how right he was. The morning of my wedding dawned bright and clear. I stood in the bridal suite, surprisingly calm as Malik adjusted my veil. "She'll show up," he said, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "You know that, right?" "I'm counting on it." I touched the manila envelope hidden in my bouquet. "Everything's ready?" "Jason's in position. Your parents are seated, and that private investigator you hired is watching all the exits." A knock at the door made us both jump. My mother entered, looking uncertain. "Sylvia's here," she said. "She's wearing white." Of course she was. "Perfect," I smiled. "Everything's going exactly as planned." "Thea." Mom stepped closer, wringing her hands. "Maybe we should postpone, after what happened at yesterday's meeting." "You mean when Sylvia didn't show up?" I turned to face her. "That's exactly why we're doing this today." The ceremony began right on schedule. I watched from behind the church doors as our small group of guests settled in. Ian stood at the altar, handsome in his tuxedo. Tommy sat in the front row, fidgeting with his bow tie. And there was Sylvia, wearing a white dress that probably cost more than my entire wedding, whispering to our father. The music started. This was it. I made it halfway down the aisle before Sylvia stood up. "I object," she announced dramatically. Several guests gasped. "This wedding can't proceed." "Sylvia," our father hissed, "sit down." "No," she pointed at me, her voice shrill. "My sister is a liar and a whore. That little boy sitting there, he's not just my nephew, he's my husband's son." The church erupted in whispers. Tommy looked confused and scared. "Sylvia," I said calmly, "are you sure you want to do this? Everyone needs to know the truth." She pulled out her phone. "I have proof. Photos of Thea and Ian together 5 years ago. They had an affair while he was married to me." "Those photos are fake," Ian said firmly. "Oh, really?" Sylvia's smile was manic. "Then explain why your DNA test matches Tommy's." Another gasp from the crowd. My mother started crying. "Actually," I said, opening my bouquet and pulling out the envelope, "let's talk about DNA tests." "What are you doing?" Sylvia's confidence wavered slightly. "I have some test results of my own." I turned to address our guests. "My sister's right. Everyone does need to know the truth. Just not the truth she's telling." I pulled out the first document. "This is Tommy's real DNA test, witnessed and notarized. It proves that Ian is not his father. I handed it to our father, but that's not the interesting part. Shut up, Sylvia whispered. The interesting part, I continued, pulling out more papers, is what I found when I started digging into Sylvia's past, specifically about a baby girl born 6 years ago at St. Mary's Hospital. All color drained from Sylvia's face. A baby she had with her lover Jason before she ever met Ian. A baby she gave up for adoption to maintain her perfect image. You're lying, but her voice cracked. Jason, I called out. He stood up from the back pew, holding a tablet. Would you like to show everyone the video call you had with Emily last week? Don't you dare. Sylvia lunged forward, but our father caught her arm. Is this true? He demanded. There's more, I said, my voice steady. Those photos Sylvia has of me and Jason at the clinic? I was there because I'd caught them together, while she was married to Ian, while she was supposedly grieving her miscarriage, which was actually another abortion, Jason's baby, again. The church was dead silent. Sylvia stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. So, yes, I turned to our parents. Let's talk about truth. Let's talk about who's really been lying all these years. I did it for you, Sylvia screamed at our parents. To be the daughter you wanted, little Miss Perfect, while she jabbed a finger at me, got to do whatever she wanted. Sylvia, our mother whispered, what have you done? What I had to do, and I'd do it again. You have no idea what it's like, having to be perfect all the time. Mom? Dad? Tommy's small voice cut through the chaos. Can I go wait outside? The simple question somehow broke the tension. People started moving, talking in hushed voices. Malik led Tommy out, while our father guided a sobbing Sylvia toward the side door. I turned to Ian, still standing at the altar. Still want to marry into this crazy family? He pulled me close. More than ever. The ceremony that followed was short and sweet. As we exchanged vows, I caught a glimpse of Sylvia being driven away by our parents. She'd lost everything, her secrets, her power, her perfect image. But somehow, I felt no joy in her defeat, only relief that the truth was finally out, and sadness for the little girl who grew up thinking she had to be perfect to be loved. The reception was in full swing when Malik rushed in, his face pale. Thea, you need to come, now. I found Sylvia in the parking lot, slumped against her car, an empty pill bottle at her feet. Call an ambulance, I shouted to Malik, dropping to my knees beside her. Sylvia, can you hear me? Her eyes fluttered. Go away, let me die in peace. Not happening. I checked her pulse, rapid but steady. What did you take? Why do you care? She tried to push me away, but her movements were sluggish. You won. You destroyed me. Happy now? The ambulance arrived within minutes. As the paramedics worked, our parents appeared, Mom crying hysterically. I'm riding with her, I told Ian, already climbing into the ambulance. You're in your wedding dress, he reminded me. She's my sister. The hospital waiting room was a blur of white tulle and worried faces. Hours passed before a doctor emerged. She'll be okay, he assured us. We pumped her stomach in time, but she'll need to stay for psychiatric evaluation. Can I see her? I asked. The doctor hesitated. She's asking for you, actually. Sylvia lay in the hospital bed, looking small and broken. Her perfect makeup was gone, her designer dress replaced by a hospital gown. Why? She whispered as I sat beside her. Why didn't you just let me die? Because I love you, you idiot. I took her hand. You're my sister. I tried to ruin your wedding. I've been horrible to you our whole lives. Yes, you have. I squeezed her hand, but I understand why. She turned away. You don't understand anything. I understand that Mom and Dad put impossible expectations on you. I understand that giving up Emily broke something inside you. I understand that you've been running from your own truth for so long, you forgot who you really are. Stop, she whispered. But I continued. I understand that when Jason came back into your life last year, it brought back everything you'd tried to forget, and I understand why you tried to destroy my happiness, because you couldn't stand seeing someone else have what you'd given up. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I want to see her, Emily, just once. I know. I pulled out my phone, showing her the photo Jason had shared. She has your eyes. Sylvia's hand shook as she touched the screen. She's beautiful. Jason says her adoptive parents are wonderful. They're open to arranged visits if you want. Why are you being so kind to me? She looked up, confused. After everything I did? Because someone needs to break this cycle of hurt in our family. It might as well be me. A knock at the door interrupted us. Our parents entered, looking uncertain. Sylvia, Mom started, then stopped, seeming lost for words. I'm sorry, Sylvia whispered. I'm so sorry for everything. Dad cleared his throat. We're the ones who should be sorry. We put too much pressure on you, made you feel like you couldn't come to us. We need to talk, Mom added, about Emily, about everything. I stood to leave, but Sylvia grabbed my hand. Stay, please. What followed was hours of painful, honest conversation. Years of secrets and hurt spilled out. Mom admitted her favoritism. Dad acknowledged his rigid expectations, and Sylvia finally told them everything about Emily and Jason. When Ian appeared at the door around midnight, still in his tuxedo, I realized I'd missed my entire wedding reception. Some wedding night, huh? He said, pulling me close. I'm sorry. Don't be. He kissed my forehead. This is more important. Sylvia watched us, something shifting in her expression. You really love her, don't you? More than anything, Ian replied. Then I need to tell you both something else. She took a deep breath. Those photos I threatened you with, of you two together 5 years ago, I faked them, and I never actually had a DNA test for Tommy. I just wanted to hurt you. We know, I said gently. How? Because Tommy's real father has been in his life since day one. Remember my college boyfriend, Mark? He has visitation every other weekend. Sylvia closed her eyes. I've made such a mess of everything. Yes, I agreed, but messes can be cleaned up if you're willing to do the work. As we left the hospital that night, Ian turned to me. So, Mrs. Arnold, what now? I looked back at the hospital window, where Sylvia sat talking with our parents. Now we help her heal, and maybe, just maybe, we all learn how to be a real family. And Emily? One step at a time. I squeezed his hand. But I have a feeling our family's about to get bigger. 3 months after the wedding, I sat in a Seattle coffee shop, watching Sylvia through the window. She paced back and forth on the sidewalk, checking her watch every few seconds. She's going to wear a hole in the concrete, Ian murmured beside me. Can you blame her? I checked my own watch. Jason said they'd be here at 2. Right on cue, a blue minivan pulled up. Jason stepped out first, then helped a small girl with bouncing dark curls out of the back seat. Emily, 2 other people, her adoptive parents, followed. Sylvia froze. Through the window, I watched as Jason made introductions. Emily looked up at Sylvia curiously, clutching her adoptive mother's hand. Sylvia knelt down to Emily's level, saying something that made the little girl smile. Should we go out there? Ian asked. Not yet. Let them have this moment. The meeting lasted an hour. Emily showed Sylvia her favorite doll, chatted about kindergarten, and eventually gave her a shy hug before leaving. Sylvia stood watching the minivan drive away, tears streaming down her face. When she finally came inside, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her coffee cup. "She's perfect," Sylvia whispered. "Absolutely perfect." "They seem like wonderful parents," I offered. "They are. They've invited me to her dance recital next month." She wiped her eyes. They said I could be part of her life if I want to." "Do you?" "More than anything." She took a shaky breath. "But I need to fix myself first. I start therapy next week." "That's great, Sylvia." "I've been thinking," she continued, "about applying for jobs in Seattle. To be closer, if that's okay with everyone." "Of course it's okay," Jason said, joining us. He'd given Sylvia her space with Emily, but had stayed nearby. She should know both her parents. "Both?" Sylvia looked uncertain. "After everything I did to you?" "The past is the past." He smiled softly. "We've all made mistakes." My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "How did it go?" "Speaking of mistakes," Sylvia said, watching me type a response. "I need to apologize to Tommy, properly. What I did at the wedding, bringing him into it." "He's resilient," I assured her. "But yes, you should talk to him." The next weekend, Sylvia came over for dinner. Tommy was wary at first, hiding behind Ian's legs. "I'm sorry I scared you," Sylvia told him, kneeling down like she had with Emily. "I was very angry and sad, and I said things I shouldn't have. Can you forgive your crazy aunt?" Tommy studied her face. "Are you still sad?" "Sometimes, but I'm getting better." He nodded solemnly. "When I'm sad, Mom makes hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. Want some?" Just like that, the ice was broken. By bedtime, Tommy was showing Sylvia his entire dinosaur collection, while she listened with genuine interest. "He has your heart," she told me later, helping with dishes. "Always seeing the good in people." "He gets it from Mom, actually, when she's not playing favorites." Sylvia winced. "I'm sorry about that, too. I knew how much it hurt you, but I never said anything because I was afraid of losing their approval." "Water under the bridge. Is it?" She set down the dish towel. "Because sometimes I look at everything I did, the threats, the lies, trying to ruin your wedding, and I can't believe you've forgiven me." "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," I said carefully. "It means choosing to move forward. Besides, your actions led to some good things too." "Like what?" "Like Emily having both her parents in her life now. Like Mom and Dad finally seeing their own mistakes. Like you finally being free to be yourself instead of some perfect daughter fantasy." She was quiet for a moment. "I got a call from a law firm in Seattle yesterday. They want to interview me." "That's fantastic." "It's a smaller firm, more focused on family law, less prestigious than my old job, but maybe that's good. Maybe I need to stop chasing prestige and start chasing peace." The doorbell rang. Jason, right on time to drive Sylvia to the airport for her flight home. "Ready?" he asked her. "Almost." She turned to me. "Thank you for not giving up on me, for showing me what real strength looks like." I hugged her tight. "That's what sisters are for." As they left, I heard Jason ask, "So, tell me more about this Seattle job." Ian wrapped his arms around me. "You okay?" I watched through the window as my sister, no longer perfect, but finally real, drove away toward her new life. "Yeah," I smiled. "I think we all will be." The autumn breeze rustled through the park as Emily twirled in her new dress, showing off for Tommy, who was teaching her how to throw a frisbee. From our picnic blanket, I watched Sylvia watching them, her eyes bright with a joy I'd never seen before. "They're naturals together," she said softly, "like they've always known they were cousins." "Kids are amazing that way." I handed her a sandwich. "How's the new job?" "Different. Better." She took a bite, then added, I helped a young mother keep custody of her baby last week. It felt right. Mom appeared with more drinks, Dad trailing behind with extra snacks. They'd flown in for Emily's dance recital tomorrow, their third visit to Seattle since Sylvia moved here. "Emily, sweetheart," Mom called. "Come eat something." The little girl raced over, Tommy close behind. As they settled on the blanket, I noticed how Mom treated them exactly the same. No favorites, no comparisons. Some lessons, it seemed, had finally stuck. "Tell Aunt Thea about your dance," Emily demanded, tugging at Sylvia's sleeve. "She can see it tomorrow, honey." "But I want to show her now," Jason chuckled from where he sat with Ian, discussing some home renovation project. "She gets that persistence from you," he told Sylvia. "Ah, poor kid," Ian teased, earning a playful swat from my sister. Watching them all together, the easy laughter, the natural flow of conversation, made my throat tight. This was what family should be, not perfect, but real. "Mom?" Tommy's voice broke through my thoughts. "Can I tell them now?" I nodded, and he stood up importantly. "I'm going to be a big brother." The announcement sparked exactly the joyful chaos you'd expect. Hugs, tears, questions all around. But what struck me most was Sylvia's reaction. Instead of the jealousy or resentment I might have once expected, her happiness seemed genuinely pure. "I call dibs on planning the baby shower," she declared, hugging me tight. Later, as the kids played with their grandparents and the men packed up the picnic, Sylvia pulled me aside. "I need your advice about something." She twisted her hands nervously. "Jason asked me to marry him." "What? When?" "Last night. He said we could try again, do things right this time." "What did you say?" "That I needed to think, that I'm not the same person I was 6 years ago when we first—" She glanced at Emily. "I'm scared, Thea. What if I mess everything up again?" "You won't." "How can you be so sure?" "Because this time you're not trying to be perfect. You're just trying to be happy." She wiped away a tear. When did my little sister get so wise? Probably around the same time my big sister got so brave. A shriek of laughter made us turn. Emily had jumped on Dad's back while Tommy tried to climb up his legs. Mom was recording the whole thing on her phone, no longer caring about maintaining a dignified image. "Look at them," Sylvia mused. "A year ago this would have seemed impossible. A lot can change when you let go of old patterns." "I used to be so angry at you," she admitted, "for being able to live your life without worrying what everyone thought, for having Tommy and being a single mom without shame, for finding love with Ian. I wanted to punish you for having what I was too afraid to fight for. And now? Now I'm grateful. If you hadn't exposed all our secrets at your wedding, if you hadn't forced us all to face the truth." She squeezed my hand. "You saved me, little sister. You saved our whole family." "We saved each other," I corrected. "Now go tell Jason yes before he changes his mind." She laughed, then called out, "Jason, can we talk?" I watched them walk away hand in hand, saw the way Emily beamed at seeing her parents together. Ian came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my growing belly. "Happy?" he asked. "More than I ever thought possible." Tommy ran over, grass-stained and grinning. "Mom, Grandpa says we can get ice cream." "Does he now?" I ruffled his hair. Better hurry before he changes his mind. As my son raced off, I looked around at my assembled family, not perfect, not unbroken, but healing, strong, real, the way we were always meant to be. Sometimes the hardest battles bring the sweetest victories. Sometimes the deepest wounds lead to the most beautiful scars. And sometimes, just sometimes, the truth really does set everyone free.